Sitting at the Ravenclaw table, Lucien watched a first-year hurry up to him and felt a memory of the Sorting Hat's casual remark flicker back into his mind. "Once I've sorted the new students, I'll mention your name and have them thank you. Ever since you wore me, I feel like I've become much smarter." The Hat's words echoed unsettlingly. It had been a year. Surely it wouldn't still remember, would it? The little girl looked up at him with hopeful eyes. Lucien stiffly nodded. Her face lit up. "Hey, I knew it wasn't a mistake. The Sorting Hat said it sorts much more accurately now, and it says that's all thanks to you, Senior," she babbled. "It said it wants to thank you properly, to take you as an example. It said you're easy to recognize. Dark gold hair, dark green eyes, and well, you're very handsome." Lucien tuned out the rest. His name was going to spread among the newcomers. The legend of the student who made the Hat smarter. He imagined the Hat whispering his name in the ears of new arrivals. Heat rose to his cheeks before he managed to steady himself and think more practically. Selling alchemy tools and potions had always meant handling design, production, sales, and promotion himself. If his products proved popular, the attention would reflect back on him. If the Sorting Hat was willing to promote him, ridiculous as it sounded, it was promotion he could use. For the moment, he abandoned the urge to toss the hat into the Black Lake and give it a bath. The girl bowed and ran back to the new student area. "Hey, Lucien, why did the Sorting Hat mention you specifically?" Terry, his roommate, asked, nudging him with curiosity written all over his face. Lucien glanced up at the hat, which was still hovering over the crowd of new students, and said dryly, "I paid it for advertising." Fortunately, there weren't a dozen more extremely outgoing Ravenclaws. No one else came over to fawn. Still, every new face kept glancing in Lucien's direction. The sorting ceremony finished without the usual long pauses where a single name took forever to be decided. All went smoothly. Later, in Gryffindor, Percy escorted the new pupils to the common room. He gave the usual instructions and left, and the first years crowded in, eyes wide for any sign of real magic. Their attention was soon drawn to a counter beneath an ostentatious banner. The lettering flowed slowly and threw off tiny sparks. Holographic projections of items rotated above it. Lions, eagles, snakes, and badgers chased each other around the border. Below, an elegant line of silver script flashed. "The secrets of wisdom and courage lie within." Behind the counter stood the Weasley twins, identical and grinning. "New students, lads, lasses, come see," they called. "You don't realize how troublesome Hogwarts spa staircases are until you've been late a few times. You won't remember the patterns unless you've been late for years," Fred added. "If you're late to Snape's lesson," George finished with a grin, "you might become his potion-testing toad." Faces went pale. The twins took advantage of the moment. "But don't worry," Fred declared, producing a curious bronze compass. Its needle spun lazily. "A Ravenclaw senior has already made passage tools for you." "Ta-da!" George chimed. "For little lions who get turned around, the staircase compass," he explained theatrically. "You tell it your destination, potion classroom, and even if the stairs spin you 3 times, its needle will point the way." Fred tapped a blank parchment. Ink sketched a castle silhouette that shimmered with a blue-lit path. "And for those who want speed, the shortcut map," George announced. "It plans the most stable route for the next 5 minutes, letting you cross moving stairs like a pro." "We're taking pre-orders for a map that will give even more details," Fred added with a conspiratorial smile. "As for price, knowledge has weight." They set the staircase compass at 10 sickles for first customers. A few braver first years handed over coin purses. The twins exchanged triumphant looks. The foundation of their day's wages was secure. 2 months later, Lucien stood at his workbench and put out the flame under a cauldron, letting the potion cool. He stretched, pulled up the system panel, and opened the Emerald Tablet Loan section to check sales figures for his 7th workshop line. The platform updated in real time. After the start of term feast, both quantities and revenue had ticked up. It seemed the twins had been testing the compasses in Gryffindor. Once the 7th workshop officially established itself at Hogwarts, Lucien expected sales to rise further. The stairs were a perpetual problem. 142 staircases, many of them moving, disappearing, lifting, or changing direction. Some shifted on a schedule, some reacted to footsteps, Others required passwords. Remembering all their patterns was a skill most students didn't have. Even those who could usually navigate them could get flustered in a hurry and end up late. Tools like the staircase compass and shortcut map would remain in demand not just among first years, but among second and third years who still struggled. He had voiced his concerns about the staircases to Dumbledore once, suggesting they impeded learning. Dumbledore had smiled and said something along the lines of, "Learning to cope with the unexpected is part of their education. After they leave Hogwarts, they'll miss these moving staircases." Lucien had been nonplussed. He suspected the headmaster's attention was elsewhere: the safety of the wizarding world, old threats, and the long game. It explained why certain improvements to the school were low on Dumbledore's list. Lucien had discussed it with Flitwick and McGonagall. They all worried about a slow decline in practical skills among students. Lucien knew he couldn't change everything, but making a handful of useful tools was something he could do, and it would force him to learn more alchemy and potion making in the process. The potion had cooled enough. Lucien sliced it into candy-sized pieces, dusted them with powdered sugar, and packaged the samples. He planned to bring them to the twins the next day. New products needed feedback. Compared to compasses and maps, the edible potions would be cheap, a few bronze nuts apiece. A sickle was expensive for most students. He aimed for small profits and quick turnover. Students often pooled purchases or borrowed devices from a friend, but there would always be moments when people were separated and needed their own. Eventually, pocket money added up and they'd buy their own. In the Great Hall, Harry pushed his spoon of mushroom cream soup aside and sighed. "I haven't even had Defense Against the Dark Arts yet, and I'm already worried about Professor Lockhart." Ron brightened a little. "Yeah, he was saying he's as good at herbology as Professor Sprout. Can you believe it? That bloke's all show. Why do mums go on about him?" He mimicked Lockhart's flashy tone. "And his robes, teal and as loud as his ego. What did he say to you, Harry, when he dragged you off before class?" Harry scowled. "That wasn't before class. Class had already started. Professor Sprout was rightfully annoyed, but Lockhart pulled me away and went on about fame, newspaper headlines, the Most Charming Smile Award." He added somewhat sheepishly, "He claimed he could treat the Homping Willow. He wanted to show Sprout how to bandage it, as if that would sort it out. The tree's already crooked." Lucien listened and felt the same irritation he'd had earlier about Lockhart. A showman whose fabrications might fool some but would crumble in front of a real expert. If only a competent Defense Against the Dark Arts professor could be found, and if Lucien could learn the memory charm properly. He thought about Tom Riddle's diary, the way it had come into certain hands, and the possibilities it suggested. Perhaps studying that would teach him the memory charm, and solving one problem might help with another. 182. Materials for the Philosopher's Stone. Lucien ate his lunch in the Great Hall and watched Lockhart with quiet contempt. The man was all vanity and stories, a pretty face who gave the younger students nothing but bad advice, unless you wanted lessons in dressing, smiling for portraits, or inventing romantic lies. Lucien had been counting the days until Lockhart's inevitable early retirement. A timid voice at his shoulder interrupted his thoughts. "Hello, Harry. I'm Colin Creevey, Gryffindor. Can I take a picture of you?" Lucien turned and saw a very thin, freckled boy holding a Muggle camera, eyes bright with nervous excitement. As Colin introduced himself, Lucien realized he was Muggle-born and wanted more magical photographs to send home. Lucien was about to get up. He didn't feel needed when Colin's gaze lit on him. "You must be Lucien Grafton, right? The Sorting Hat mentioned you. Last night in the common room, I saw a pair of twin upperclassmen selling things you invented. That's amazing. It looked like alchemy. So magical." "Unfortunately, I don't have enough pocket money yet," Colin went on. "I'd love to buy a compass. The stairs this morning made me dizzy, but some of my roommates got one, so I can follow them." Lucien noted with mild amusement that the twins' business was doing well. Once first years realized how treacherous some of Hogwarts's mock staircases were, demand would only grow. Colin raised his camera and looked hopefully at Harry and Lucien. "Can I take your picture? And would you sign it for me?" Lucien waved it off and nodded. "Harry, used to being photographed by the prophet and by Lockhart's antics, hesitated a moment but agreed. Colin snapped several shots, then crouched beside Harry to check them out. I heard with a special developing potion the photos can move, Colin said. Magic's incredible. If you can, please sign them for me, Colin added. I'm bothering you. A flippant voice drawled from behind. Potter, it seems someone else is qualified to hand out autographs now, huh? Shall we line up? Harry didn't need to turn to know who it was. He looked over and saw Draco Malfoy, smirking. Harry's expression toward the insult was oddly unreadable. He stole a quick glance at Lucien and found Lucien's smile faintly amused. Malfoy expected a reaction, but got none. He noticed the odd atmosphere and instinctively looked at Lucien. Lucien found Draco entertaining. The boy's sharp tongue reminded him of Harry in a way, jealousy masked as scorn, the cocksure hunger for acceptance. An idea amused him. He leaned toward Colin and with a conspiratorial chuckle, said loud enough for Draco to hear, This is Draco Malfoy, of the Malfoy family, one of the Sacred 28, a pure-blood noble. Colin, aren't you documenting magical people? The heir of Malfoy should be representative enough, right? Lucien shot Colin a wink. The boy caught the hint and held his camera out. May I take your picture? Malfoy froze. He'd been simmering over Potter's recent attention, jealous that the Daily Prophet had photographed Harry. Now a grubby first year wanted his picture too? Lucien's sly introduction gave him an out. As heir of the Malfoys, he was unquestionable material. He cleared his throat and, masking his excitement, said, Ahem, Malfoy grants it. Go ahead. He straightened, composed himself, and Colin began snapping away. Can you strike a pose? Colin asked. Malfoy hesitated, but then made a stiff little diamond with his hands, a forced pose that left his neck a little red with embarrassment. Lucien nodded to himself. The purebloods were the perfect market for the twins' wares. Their pockets were usually full. Lucien's fingers brushed the colorful crystal ball hidden in his pocket. In his special sight, thin, bright ribbons of feeling flowed off Malfoy and into the orb. He had learned to collect such emotions from Professor Nicholas. Emotions, joy, anger, sorrow, excitement, were ripples of the soul, tiny but tangible stores of soul energy. They weren't as potent as the energy released at death, of course, but they were everywhere and continuously replenished. Where did emotions flare the most? With children and teenagers. A school, especially a magical one, was a treasure trove. Nicholas had taught him the theory of the Philosopher's Stone. The purest material would be the residue of soul energy left at death. At first, Lucien had thought of whole souls, but he'd realized that using human souls was monstrously wrong. Clearly dark arts. If that were necessary, Nicholas would be a reviled criminal, not a master alchemist. Instead, Nicholas had sent Lucien a task: find another material. Emotions, the colors of a soul, could substitute. They were ubiquitous and could be gathered without the moral stain of slaughter. The crystal ball required constant maintenance and subtle magic to draw in feelings, but it worked. Lucien had also been fascinated by Hogwarts itself. After learning the method of observing and capturing emotions, he'd noticed that the castle seemed to absorb the dissipated magic of its students to keep itself running, and, he suspected, to collect their emotional energy as well. The old founders must have engineered ways to harvest this flux. What cores or rune structures lay in the heart of the castle? He wanted to see them. Dumbledore would know, but such secrets weren't given up lightly. Perhaps he'd need to be Principal Grafton someday to learn them. After lunch, he headed out toward the greenhouses. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were already gathered for herbology. Professor Sprout arrived in her usual practical clothes, patched hat, dirt on her skirts, but today she wore a very uncharacteristic frown. Trailing behind her in a blinding silver robe flanked by dangling metal badges was Lockhart, unhatched, letting his blonde hair catch the sun. Lockhart was talking as he walked. Pomona, this morning's method wasn't very effective. I mixed it up with that troll incident. My adventures are so numerous, one needs to keep them tidy, don't you think? He leaned toward Sprout. Ordinary charms merely irritate the Homping Willow. There's an ancient calming ritual. One must sing an enchanting elf lullaby on a moonlit night. Lucien suppressed a smile. Lockhart sounded like he was stealing scraps from the sort of ancient techniques Nicholas had taught him. If pressed, Lockhart would probably flounder with excuses and change the subject. Sprout's irritation grew with every insincere flourish. Several girls giggled at Lockhart's practiced smile. A few boys admired him. Sprout was about to speak when Lockhart's eyes landed on someone in the group. Those dark green eyes, he remembered the book signing a few days ago and the young wizard whose presence had been almost as striking as his own. For a moment, Lockhart's practiced composure cracked. Lucien's gaze was calm and unjudging, but it made Lockhart feel bare, as if his veneers were seen through. He swallowed and abruptly declared, "Ahem, I just remembered I have something to do. I won't disturb you. Goodbye," and fled toward the castle. He left so quickly that relief washed over him almost instantly, and his confidence returned. The diary he'd found would provide a great event yet. Fame was still within reach. Sprout, untroubled, waved to the students. "All right, into Greenhouse 3. First years had only been in Greenhouse 1. 3 held more interesting and more dangerous plants. Sprout called them to order. "Today we'll be repotting mandrakes. Who can tell me what mandrakes are used for?" Hands shot up. Mandrake, mandragora, its root sap is used in powerful restoratives to return people who've been transfigured or cursed to their human form, a Ravenclaw answered. Lucien knew the plant well. He kept a small patch in his trunk. Mandrakes were dangerous. Mature cries could be fatal, but their restorative properties were invaluable when pranks went too far. "Very good, Ravenclaw. 10 points, Sprout said, then asked about their dangers. After another correct answer, she turned to the group. "Excellent. Everyone take a pair of earmuffs first." At those words, the students surged to the bench where the earmuffs sat. None of them wanted to be the slow one left with the silly pink pair. 183. Mandrake, Lullaby Greenhouse. 3 smelled of damp soil and green growth. Lucien picked up a pair of earmuffs deliberately, not hurried. There were exactly 1 more pair of earmuffs than there were students, the extra set clearly for Professor Sprout. As the other students took their earmuffs and returned to their benches, Sprout herself picked up the last pair, a small pink set, and placed them on. "I've told you to put them on properly. Seal them tightly," she called. "When I hold up 2 fingers, you'll be able to take them off. Now, put them on." The students complied, checking one another's fit. Sprout demonstrated the proper technique next. She yanked a mandrake out of its pot by the leaves. What came up was not roots, but an ugly human-shaped baby. Pale green skin pocked with spots, a contorted face, its mouth opening and closing in a constant, furious cry. The earmuffs were excellent. Lucien could not hear a thing. Sprout quickly shoved the mandrake into a larger pot and buried it with soil and fertilizer, leaving only its green leaves exposed. Then she held up 2 fingers. The students removed their earmuffs. Behind Sprout, a venomous tentacula lashed out with spiky, dark red tentacles. She swatted them away with a practiced hand. "Be careful with the fertilizer," she warned. "These tentacula have developed teeth." "All right, 4 to a group," she said. Lucien and his roommate Terry were paired with the Hufflepuffs, Hannah Abbott and Susan Bones. Each group was given a pot of mandrakes and the usual tools. When Lucien pulled his mandrake free, it made no sound. The little mouth stayed firmly shut. He wasn't surprised. His reputation as the diligent little gardener came with an unspoken affinity for plants. Unless someone deliberately provoked them, many of these magical saplings tolerated him. The others were less fortunate. The mandrakes Terry and the Hufflepuffs plucked began to scream, or at least to struggle noisily. The earmuffs muffled the shrieks, but the plants still writhed, twisting and flailing as if furious at being uprooted. Even placed into new pots and left unburied, they continued to twist restlessly. Lucien had almost finished reburying his silent mandrake when he noticed Hannah clutching her hand. Her mandrake had fallen to the floor, and Lucien's eyes widened, had bitten her. Even as seedlings, mandrakes had a nasty bite. Lucien drew his wand and cast a quick healing spell. The pain drained away. Hannah peeled off her dragonhide glove to reveal a small row of bright red teeth marks already paling. She saw Lucien and, probably forgetting everyone still wore earmuffs, thanked him loudly. He nodded. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the fallen mandrake twisting toward Hannah's ankle. No dragonhide there. A bite would be messy. Lucien's lips moved in a soft, foreign cadence. He released a single word in a gentle tone, "Slumber." The mandrake froze, its little mouth opening and closing a couple of times. Then it slumped into sleep. Surprisingly, the sound carried faintly even through the earmuffs. Terry and a few nearby students felt a sudden wave of drowsiness and couldn't help blinking. Because Lucien stopped almost immediately and the earmuffs insulated most of the sound, their drowsiness passed quickly. The mandrakes in several potted groups were quieter for a time, less boisterous than before. Lucien pointed to Hannah's ankle. She looked down, startled, and scooped the sleeping mandrake up. She breathed out in obvious relief. Bite wounds could be healed, but they hurt. And again, not remembering the muffling, thanked Lucien in a low voice. He waved it away, thinking about what he'd just used. He had been experimenting with a spell called the Moon Slumber Melody, a lullaby-like charm he had found in a book from Nicholas's collection. The spell was attributed to an ancient wizard of Vila descent and worked by soothing creatures, humans, animals, even magical plants, into deep sleep. It required being sung in a particular tune. The incantation read like a long line of lyrics rather than a short charm. The more completely the song was sung, the stronger and more assured the effect. Lucien's attempt had been clumsy, just a single word delivered in the right cadence, and his control wasn't yet precise. Still, it had enough of the melody to calm the mandrake at Hannah's ankle. He thought of what Nicholas had explained. Ancient wizards didn't have codified charms, potions, or alchemy handed down to them. They discovered magic experimentally, each bringing their own understanding and tastes to the spells they fashioned. The old spells, therefore, bore strong personal signatures. Some of that magic had survived exactly because it fit its creator perfectly. Much of it vanished with its makers because it was difficult to pass on. Lucien couldn't help wishing more of that knowledge had been preserved, the sort of lore that came from making magic from nothing. The rest of herbology passed in sweaty concentration. Mandrakes were hard work, everyone left with sore backs and aching wrists. For Lucien, who spent far more time in soil than most, the labor barely amounted to warm-up. After class, Hannah found him again to offer a proper, quieter thank you now that they could hear one another. Lucien smiled and then went to find Professor Sprout. Earlier that morning, Fawkes had delivered a letter from Dumbledore asking for Lucien's help. The Humping Willow needed healing. It was, Lucien knew, the only Humping Willow left in Britain. If it were killed, by a stray car or otherwise, it would be a terrible loss. Its branches, leaves, and bark had valuable medicinal properties. Snape occasionally harvested pieces for potion work. Dumbledore had requested that Lucien use Cheelin's saliva to heal the willow. Without it, the tree might not survive. In return, Lucien was to be allowed to collect any fallen branches and bark. He was more than willing, not only for their potion uses, but because he needed the willow's branches and leaves for a spell he wanted to construct himself. 184. Treatment of the Humping Willow. Lucien followed Professor Sprout to the Humping Willow. The tree, once tall and upright, looked sickly now. Its branches hung limp, and the trunk bore a large, jagged hole. Lucien clicked his tongue. It had been hit hard, almost split in two. "The Humping Willow is injured and weakened," Sprout said with a pained look. "But it's also more irritable and dangerous. The slightest disturbance will set it off, which makes treating it that much harder." She peered at the wounded trunk and muttered, regret in her voice. "Before, you could just press a knot on a branch and the willow would freeze. That doesn't work anymore." "Let's not talk about whatever Lockhart suggested," Lucien said quietly. Lucien understood the problem. The willow needed rest to heal, but in its weakened state it was frenzied. Any attack would reopen the wounds and undo prior repairs. Dumbledore had likely decided to use Cheelin's saliva for its reputed ability to restore vitality, strengthen the tree's life force first, then heal it properly. Still, calming the tree first would help. Lucien pulled a pair of custom earplugs from his pocket and handed them to Sprout. "Professor, put these on. I want to try to quiet it so we can treat it." Sprout, who hadn't been watching Lucien's group closely during the earlier herbology class, peered at the earplugs but slipped them in anyway. Whatever he planned, it couldn't be worse than Lockhart's ideas. Lucien raised his wand and began to sing in a distant, otherworldly tune. "Moonlight soft, spread beneath your pillow. Night deep, hiding all fear. Let breath sink into the silver lake. Let sweet dreams sprout with the moonlight." The willow's trembling branches gradually stilled as if lulled into sleep. Using the Eye of Peering magic, Lucien confirmed that the tree's inner magic had calmed. He didn't want to risk relying on the plant affinity from the diligent little gardener. He wasn't sure if it would work on such a frenzied specimen, so he used his moon slumber melody to put the willow into a deep, peaceful slumber first. At first, Sprout began to pull him back out of instinct, but the tree no longer reacted. The violent, restless energy was gone. Wearing the earplugs, Sprout couldn't hear the chant, but she saw Lucien's wand movements and the long, steady charms at work. A skilled herbologist, she quickly confirmed that the willow had indeed become very still, almost asleep. Lucien stepped forward, touched the torn tree trunk, and murmured an apology. He produced a small vial and let a few drops of Keelan saliva soak into the roots. The bark visibly brightened, the withered look faded, and the willow seemed to gain a little strength. Sprout applied a special restorative potion to the wound and bound it with enchanted bandages. Lucien inwardly grinned. Bandages really did work. He gathered fallen branches, leaves, and bark from around the tree. They could be used in potions or for alchemical components, but most important, Lucien planned to use them to construct a defensive spell he had learned from an ancient magic book, the Knowledge Barrier. Its effect was similar to occlumency, resisting mental intrusion and protecting the mind, but broader. The Knowledge Barrier defended against legilimency and other magic targeting the soul and memory, like Imperious and memory charms, by using the caster's own knowledge to build a semi-permanent protective structure through a blend of alchemy and charms. It was a little like modifying the Eye of Peering magic, except it didn't require physical adjustments. Lucien liked that the barrier grew stronger with the amount of knowledge the caster possessed. Compared with occlumency, it suited him better. By the time Lucien finished collecting the debris, Sprout had completed her treatment. He returned to the trunk, reached into a bag, and poured a handful of fertilizer around the willow's base to encourage recovery. Sprout brightened immediately. "These fertilizers are excellent, Lucien. Where did you get them?" Lucien had bought them in the Great Hall. Earlier, the Weasley twins had set up a grand stall for the 7th workshop, Hogwarts Special, and their loud salesmanship had drawn a crowd of students. Their display attracted plenty of attention. Some students lingered, comparing notes and items. Lucien's inventions were on offer there too, and people were already asking where they came from. It just so happened that Malfoy was strolling past the stall with his usual entourage. He stopped to look and learned the items were Lucien's creations. One in particular, the map that could plan routes, caught his eye. Price didn't matter to him. Malfoy wasn't short on money. He had Goyle ask the price and prepared to pay, thinking of it as a way to keep an eye on promising young inventors. "Hey, George, our custom-made map Zabini ordered should be ready soon," one twin said. "Oh, right. Wealthy purebloods always want their family crest or a unique symbol carved on things. Unique items are the standard for nobles, aren't they? This will be the first custom map. It's sure to make people jealous." Malfoy's hand, which had been reaching for his money, froze at the word custom. Custom? Unique? Buying the exact same goods as everyone else, even the most expensive, had never felt special to him. Seeing Malfoy's reaction, the twins exchanged a quick, satisfied glance. Their plan was working. Outside the Ravenclaw common room, the Weasley twins and Lucien were animatedly trading stories of their recent successes, their gestures drawing the attention of passing younger students. The 7th workshop had only been open a few days, and its earnings had already exceeded all the pocket money Fred and George had ever saved. Between their share of the profits and the agreed wages, opening a joke shop after graduation was beginning to feel less like a fantasy and more like a plan. The Weasleys had never expected their parents to bankroll them, so Fred and George had always been scrimping and saving. Listening to them, Lucien's expression went curious. "So the first custom map customer was Malfoy?" he asked. "That's right," Fred said. "You told us to stress how exclusive and prestigious customized maps are to rich purebloods, and the Malfoy boy was the first to bite." George grinned. "We played it up, gave him an excuse, and he fell for it. Gotta admit, that sales pitch works. We'll keep teasing the Slytherins with it." "Malfoy has money," Fred added. 50 galleons, just like that. I told him we'd put his order first. First in Slytherin, hell, first in the whole school to have a custom map, and he actually believed it. Lucien rubbed his temples. Of all people to be the first customer, the Malfoy boy. Still, given Draco's nature, if he saw other purebloods getting custom maps, he'd want one too. Nobles like to stand out. They wouldn't settle for something ordinary. What did he ask for? Family crest? Personal seal? George fished a sheet of paper from his pocket and handed it to Lucien. It's all written down. Lucien read it, and though he'd expected every item, couldn't hide a small smile. The note said, "Engrave Malfoy family crest, see attached. Engrave Slytherin house crest, see attached. Exclusively owned by Draco Malfoy. VIP map number 1. Got it. I'll make his first. If you're free this weekend, do you want to come by and I'll show you how to make the basic compass maps?" Lucien asked. The twins hadn't yet mastered building those devices. The custom maps were more complex and only Lucien could do them. Customization sold uniqueness, but it also meant better materials and more features. "Oh, and I've analyzed this, so I'll return it to you." When there was no one passing, Lucien handed them a blank parchment. Fred took it, tapped it with his wand, and recited, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Ink lines sprang up across the parchment, extending and joining until, in a blink, a map of Hogwarts unfurled. The Marauders map, the famous creation of the 4 Marauders, including Harry's father. It was a remarkable piece of magic. Not only did it show everyone's location in the castle, it revealed secret passages, too. Lucien admired the cleverness of its makers, the anchored spells, the sustained enchantments, and the way alchemical principles had been woven in. James and Sirius, purebloods with information and talent, Lupin, steady and expert in defense against the dark arts, and Peter Pettigrew, an animagus, had used their transformations to slip through every corner of Hogwarts and find hidden routes. With the map as a reference, Lucien had saved himself a great deal of trouble and had managed to finish the compasses and maps before term started. The period of study had taught him the map's underlying principles. "We found this in Filch's drawer," Fred said, tucking the map away with a chuckle. Something that good was just gathering dust. George spread his hands. What else could he do? Filch can't do magic. How could he use it? I even saw a quick spell correspondence course for beginners in there. Lowering his voice, George added, "Filch must be a squib. Lucien, you know what a squib is, right?" Lucien nodded. A squib was born into a wizarding family, but couldn't perform magic. It was, in a way, worse than being a muggle born into wizardry. Squibs saw the wonder of magic, but could never touch it. Most lived modest, often difficult lives. Lucien had used his peering eye on Filch and found a faint magical circuit inside him. Some flow of magic, but many nodes were blocked or too thin for magic to pass. What little remained was consumed within the circuit before it could resonate with a wand. Lucien had even considered devising an alchemical tool to channel a squib's residual magic and let them perform simple, trick-style spells, but the market would be tiny and poor, a project more like charity than business. After a few more words with the twins, Lucien headed back to his dorm to continue his work. At breakfast in the Great Hall, Ron was already complaining. "Lucien, have you had Lockhart's Defense Against the Dark Arts class yet? Don't expect much if you haven't. I reckon he's worse than Professor Quirrell. Last year at least didn't have Cornish pixies biting my robes," Ron continued. "I saw a pixie snatch Lockhart's wand. Is he even reliable?" Harry, still jumpy from bad DADA teachers, gulped his pumpkin juice and agreed. "Lockhart's stories are interesting, but the man himself—" "In the end, it was up to the 3 of us to catch the pixies," Harry said. "If it weren't for the magic you taught us, Lucien, it would have been a real mess." Hermione was about to point out that Lockhart might have been giving them a practical lesson, but Lucien just smiled. "What, you'd want a different defense against the dark arts, Professor?" Time to keep an eye on how Lockhart and Tom Riddle's diary are progressing. Chapter 186, The Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom buzzed with a mix of curiosity and relief. Gilderoy Lockhart stood at the podium in a pale gold robe, medals glittering on his chest. He held a book up so everyone could see the photograph on the cover, his own beaming face, and pointed to it with a dramatic flourish. "Although this is my first time teaching you," he began, "I believe you already know me." Out of respect for the art of teaching, however, allow me to introduce myself properly. Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. A boy's muffled laugh drifted through the room. Hey, of course, a charming smile can't repel a werewolf. Lockhart was about to launch into another anecdote about his exploits when he noticed Lucien seated among the students. For reasons he couldn't have explained, the sight made him unexpectedly nervous. He straightened and cleared his throat. A quick quiz to start the term, he announced. Don't worry, just to see if you've done any advanced reading. Unlike many professors who used magic to send test papers fluttering onto desks, Lockhart personally handed each pupil a sheet. A few of the girls let out small squeals of delight. Lucien took his paper and began to write, but if anyone had watched closely, they would have seen the quill guiding his hand. Lucien's own invention, an answering quill that could write responses once the knowledge had been fed into it, had done the work. It only solved multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank questions, but that was more than enough for Lockhart's little quiz. The questions were self-serving and trivial. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite flower? Which adventure earned Gilderoy Lockhart the Order of Merlin? All answers could be found in his autobiographies. There was some value in the adventure tales. After all, the original heroes had really faced danger. Lockhart had only stolen their memories, but he mixed in so much personal fluff that it felt like filling one's head with nonsense. Lucien was glad to have the quill. When Lockhart collected the papers and graded them on the spot, he was surprised to find one perfect score, Lucien Grafton's. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if Lucien was a shy admirer who hid his devotion behind an austere silence. Lockhart announced the result and awarded Ravenclaw 10 points. Because of the house elf incident in his previous class with Harry and his friends, Lockhart had learned to avoid bringing any living creatures into demonstrations. He did not trust his ability to handle them. Defense against the dark arts is a very serious subject, he said, trying for gravitas. Theory is important, but practice is indispensable. Several students leaned forward, hopeful. After Quirrell's dry textbook readings last year, they were all eager for something more practical, some proper instruction in countering the dark arts. Lockhart's fans were especially attentive. His storytelling had a polish that outshone a plain reading from a book. So I shall recount my experiences personally, Lockhart continued, warming to the role. Words on a page are nothing compared to the heat of the tale. Tibet, the savage stupidity of the Yetis. A ripple of excitement ran through the class. Is that really? Some students whispered. A few fangirls practically drooled. Is there anyone who would like to reenact that adventure with me? Lockhart asked, his smile radiant. I believe a live demonstration will give you all a unique experience. His eyes landed on Lucien, who sat with his head bowed. Lockhart decided to play to the audience and called on the supposedly reserved student. Grafton, would you come up and play the part of the Yeti? The snowy mountain struggle would be perfect for you. Lucien looked up and gave him a small, polite smile. Professor, there's no need. If you need a Yeti, I can conjure one. He produced his wand and a faint glow gathered at the tip. Lockhart felt a sudden jolt of panic. One test of a spell against his face could ruin years of carefully managed charm. He waved his hand frantically. Oh, no, we don't. No wands in class. That's not elegant. Lockhart's objection had nothing to do with safety. It was vanity. He feared any mishap tarnishing his image. He quickly improvised, bringing another student up for a clumsy, heavily staged reenactment while the class watched with mixed amusement. When the bell rang, Lockhart praised the volunteer and dismissed the lesson with an assignment. For homework, write an essay reflecting on my feat with the Yeti. The best submission will receive a signed copy of Magical Me. He closed the lesson in triumph and retreated to his office next door. There, as was his habit, he spent several minutes in front of the mirror, fussing over his hairstyle, straightening his collar and cuffs, and practicing his signature smile until it was exactly right. Satisfied, he settled at his desk, brewed a cup of black tea, and took a faded diary out of a locked drawer. For a moment, the mirror still held his smiling reflection as he uncapped a large peacock quill and began to write. Unseen on top of a locker in the classroom, A common robin watched with bright, dark eyes that seemed almost human in their expression of exasperation. It cocked its head as Lockhart muttered to himself while jotting notes. "There's a chamber of secrets in the school," Lockhart whispered to the empty room, eyes glittering. "And a monster is hidden inside. Oh, and it can be controlled. Yes, create incidents, cause panic. Then I, Gilderoy Lockhart, will appear as the hero who vanquishes it." He wrote quickly, the quill scratching emphatically on the page. A visible, real adventure. "We save some students. We save the future of the wizarding world, and perhaps another order of Merlin. Third class is far too low." The robin listened in silence, every sense alert. It was Lucien, transformed and perched where no one would notice, fuming inwardly. Lockhart's plan, and the eager greed behind it, had just become far more dangerous with Lucien now knowing the details. 187. Airguns, Malfoy's flight training room of requirement. "Harry, this thing is better than a wand." No need to cast spells, just a gentle press. It's a pity the effect is a bit one-note. Ron held something shaped like a hairdryer and excitedly explained its effects to Harry. When a training dummy drifted close, Ron aimed the hairdryer and pressed a button. Magic runes flashed and a transparent cannon of compressed air shot out, sending the dummy skidding away. The noise drew the attention of everyone practicing defense against the dark arts and dueling. They turned, curious and puzzled. Ron jogged over to Lucien, still grinning and holding the device. "Lucien, do you think I did all right?" Lucien took it and examined the construction. He had given the rough concept and some guidance. Ron had finished the actual work. They dubbed it the air gun. It used simple alchemy, suffocation charms, compression charms, and acceleration charms to condense and fire air. Its punch was respectable, enough to blow a dummy clear across the room or to send a person tumbling. It couldn't permanently injure anyone, but its rapid-fire nature outpaced a novice caster. This semester, Lucien had officially begun tutoring Harry and others in defense against the dark arts, drilling one-on-one, two-on-two, and even one-on-many scenarios. Only active practice would let them internalize what they learned. Everyone else was making good progress. Some had talent, some solid foundations. Ron alone lagged behind, handicapped by his wand. It was his brother's old wand, and simply not well matched to him. That poor compatibility affected his spellwork. Fortunately, thanks to Lucien's earlier reinforcements to the flying car, Ron's wand wasn't going to backfire with explosive consequences. Lucien thought it might be best if Ron got a new wand at the earliest opportunity. The twins were already earning money, and Lucien guessed they'd take him to replace it over the winter break. Meanwhile, he'd let Ron work with easily adjustable alchemical tools like the air gun, and then properly practice charms and dueling once he had a wand that fit. You did quite well. It's just these magic runes here, and," Lucien began. With Lucien's explanation, Ron understood what needed changing and eagerly got to work. After modifying it, he set his wand aside and fired the air gun at the dummy, making delighted bang-bang noises and muttering how convenient it was, almost like a muggle metal wand. The session wound down, and as everyone left, Malfoy sidled up to Lucien. "Lucien, I remember you're a very good flyer. How are you at Quidditch, say as a seeker?" Lucien studied the boy, trying to smile, but not quite. "Slytherin," he thought. "Is this like that Cho from their house, always trying to drag me onto the team?" Oh, Malfoy had been sponsoring Slytherin this year. His father had bought a few Firebolt 2001s for the house team, and Draco would naturally join. He'd heard the position open was seeker. "What, are you planning to go up against Harry on the pitch this year?" Lucien asked. At that, Malfoy relaxed. "Ha-ha, Lucien, you're perceptive. Gryffindor doesn't stand a chance at the cup this year. I've been approved by Flint, the captain, and I'm to be the house seeker. Since you fly so well, I wondered if you'd coach me." He added quickly, remembering to sweeten the deal. "Of course, the tutoring fee is extra." He produced a small book and tried to slip it into Lucien's pocket. Lucien, letting him, thought wryly, "Who says foreigners don't do favors? What a prejudice. If you want to practice, doesn't the house team have official training?" Lucien asked. Malfoy pouted, half embarrassed. "Do you remember Slytherin's style of play? I can't quite get into it." Slytherin's style, Lucien recalled the matches he'd seen last year. Slytherin played rough. Quidditch there often looked less like a sport and more like a battle with a ball. Beaters sending bludgers into opponents, overt physical tactics that were allowed within Hogwarts rules. Broken bones and concussions were unpleasant but not unheard of. Flint, the captain, was a burly, aggressive type who set the tone. Draco, lean and slight, didn't seem to fit that bruising style, but a seeker needed speed, agility, sharp reflexes, and skilled flying. Lucien felt confident he could coach Draco in the flying skills. High-speed movement was more about better vision and control than brute strength. The exaggerated clarity granted by the eye of peering magic, what he called his enhancement trick, made a huge difference. Besides, he'd been studying broom design and inventing improvements. He'd bought several leading models for comparison and was gathering data. Brooms were a huge market. Quidditch was practically the wizarding world's national pastime, and families and professionals alike spent heavily on quality gear. The Firebolt line was the gold standard. Comet and Cleansweep lagged behind. Lucien was confident he could design something faster and better than the Firebolt, confidence born of being Nicholas Flamel's student and of his SS Plus talent in alchemy. "All right, no problem," he said. Malfoy brightened. "Oh, and here's the custom map you asked for. Want to take a look?" Lucien handed him the map. The craftsmanship, the understated, exquisite design, made Draco's gray eyes light up. He felt the expense had been worth it. Slytherin Common Room. A cluster of younger students crowded around Malfoy, peering at the map spread on the table. "So many routes? You can pick the fastest way? The school has secret passages. We should check them tonight. Hey, it even shows Argus Filch and Madame Norris. Filch's cat is on there too." Rowdy, adventure-hungry students recognized the map's value for after-dark excursions. While they could trick a squib or a cat with a spell, if they didn't get away quickly, they could still be caught. "The patterns are so detailed. Why does mine look different?" "Yeah, mine didn't show Filch and the cat." "Draco, didn't you buy yours from the 7th workshop?" As rich purebloods, many already owned expensive, comprehensive maps and now compared them with Malfoy's. Enjoying the attention, Draco feigned modesty. "This was custom-made by Lucien. It's not mass-produced." He tapped the map with his wand. A Malfoy family crest appeared, prominently displayed. The overall design used black, green, and silver, embellished with dragon and serpent motifs. A silver ribbon bore the Latin words Sanctimonia Vincet Semper, purity will always conquer. The Slytherin house crest, a graceful serpent, had faint golden edges. All the elements combined cleverly, not cluttered but luxurious. The others who owned ordinary maps suddenly felt a little foolish. "This is personally made by Lucien, and it has an exclusive logo," Draco said, flipping it to show the emblem in the upper left corner. A book transforming into a hawk with the letters LG. Someone muttered, "Even the logo on Draco's custom version looks better than mine." The younger students gaped, but some 6th and 7th years taking alchemy spotted something deeper. They couldn't parse all the alchemical work in the map, but they recognized quality. Lucien Grafton, who'd set off the fireworks in the Great Hall last Halloween and helped Ravenclaw win the House Cup, had a reputation. "Draco, how many galleons did this cost?" someone asked. Draco sniffed, chin lifting. "Galleons," he repeated with a curl of his lip. "For a Malfoy, value isn't measured in galleons, but in taste. What I approve of is naturally unique." Many thought him showy, but some envied the sentiment. Pureblood status was about distinction after all. Draco glanced at Blaise Zabini. "Blaise, what do you think of this map? Look at the craftsmanship." Blaise Zabini, dark-skinned and narrow-eyed, bristled oddly at being put on the spot. He frowned. What was there to show off about a map? His mother had had 7 husbands, 7, and the inheritances had passed to her. Zabini was wealthy in his own right. He adjusted his collar and left the common room without answering. He wasn't wrong. Money was plentiful among the Slytherins, and many had the means to match or surpass Malfoy. Still, the map was elegant, and the exclusive mark had status value. Several older students taking alchemy were genuinely intrigued. Could a second year truly produce such work? Ravenclaw's reputation for cleverness made people curious. It might be worth buying one to study. Money, after all, was just a number to most Slytherins. Watching Zabini go, Draco felt satisfied and grateful for his connection to Lucien. That link had gotten him this head start and the attention in common room. Had it been anyone else who'd pushed a similar product, Zabini's silence might not have been so decisive. Back in the Ravenclaw common room, Lucien sorted through the stack of custom map orders and the detailed requests the twins had left. Some wanted names inscribed, some family crests, some a motto. A few included sappy love notes, couples' vows that made Lucien a little queasy. Still, he recognized a good marketing idea: bundle sales, associate products with romance or friendship, diamonds are forever tactics. Black-hearted merchant Lucien allowed himself a small smirk. Malfoy had been excellent advertising. Lucien had only asked him to mention the custom VIP map around Slytherin and left the rest to the boy. It had worked far better than expected. Since Malfoy had done him a favor, Lucien decided to make the flying lessons a bit more intense in the coming days. After all, training wasn't going to be free. It was barely dawn when the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, Oliver Wood, rousted Harry from his bed. Still half asleep, Harry was hauled out, told to wash, change into his practice robes, and take his Nimbus 2000. He hadn't even made it to the common room door before he was stopped by Colin Creevey. Colin was like a shadow these days, always brimming with excitement and bristling with questions. He seemed to have memorized Harry's schedule and would ask the same things 6 or 7 times a day. Harry had tried to tell him Quidditch practice would be dull, but Colin refused to be discouraged and followed him in a constant chatter, camera swinging on his chest. They stepped into the cool morning air and began toward the pitch, Colin trailing like a small, eager toad. Harry yawned and tried to wake properly when Colin called out, bright as sunlight, "Hey, Lucien, good morning." Harry looked where Colin was pointing and stopped cold. Walking back from the direction of the pitch was Lucien, unmistakable even at that hour. He was carrying a broom, not a broom Harry knew, but a Nimbus 2001. Harry's stomach tightened. When had Lucien gotten one? A Nimbus 2001 was newer and faster than Harry's Nimbus 2000. Was Lucien joining the Ravenclaw team? Had he finished some special training and was heading back to the castle? The thought of facing someone like Lucien in a match made Harry's chest tighten. Ravenclaw might not be numerically strong, but Lucien certainly was. "Morning, Colin." "Harry," Lucien said with a small wave and headed off toward the castle. He looked as if he hadn't a care in the world, breakfast clearly on his mind, and Harry didn't get a chance to ask anything. They hurried on. By the time Harry reached the changing room, everyone from the Gryffindor team was there. Wood was pacing, gesturing, laying out tactics he'd supposedly researched over the summer. Harry fought drowsiness and concentrated. Last year's final still nagged at him. His absence had contributed to Gryffindor's humiliating defeat, and he didn't want to repeat. When Wood's lecture finally ended, they filed out to the pitch. In the stands were Ron and Hermione, and Colin with his camera poised, ready to snap anything dramatic. Ron held up a lunchbox, calling out, "This is breakfast Lucien asked us to bring you. Eat it after practice, okay?" Harry felt warmth at the gesture and waved in thanks. He had barely taken off when Wood noticed Colin taking pictures and bristled. Thinking the boy a Slytherin spy, he was about to swoop down and stop him, but George Weasley pulled him back. "Don't worry," George said, nodding toward the far side of the field. "Slytherin don't have to send spies." Wood turned, and in the direction George had indicated, saw a cluster of green-robed students. Furious, he landed right in front of them, breathless. "Flint, we're training now. I've booked the pitch. You should go." Marcus Flint, tall, broad-shouldered, and as blunt as a bludgeon, met Wood with disdain rather than moving. He smirked and reached into his robe. "Is that so? Then let me read this note to some people." He ruffled an official-looking scrap. "Ahem, I, Professor Severus Snape, permit the Slytherin team to train on the Quidditch pitch today to cultivate their new seeker." Wood's face darkened. "Where is this new seeker?" Flint stepped back and, with theatrical pride, gestured. The Slytherin players made a show of parting, and standing behind them, looking sleepy and half asleep, was Draco Malfoy. Flint grabbed him roughly and hauled him forward, slapping his back as if to wake him completely. "Draco Malfoy, the new Slytherin seeker," he crowed. "Thanks to him, our team also has a new batch of excellent equipment." At that, the Slytherins raised broomsticks, a line of gleaming Nimbus 2001s that flashed in the thin morning light. The The sight of the shiny new brooms put pressure on the Gryffindor players. Malfoy, clutching his arms from Flint's heavy pats, secretly cursed the man, but also felt too sleepy to argue. He had been up at 4 in the morning, as Lucien had insisted. Lucien's training philosophy had been simple. If you haven't seen Hogwarts at 4 in the morning, how can you become an excellent seeker? So Malfoy had got out of bed, even when it felt impossible. He'd even been carrying a small vial of something Lucien had given him, a coffee-colored potion called Ox-Horse Potion. Lucien had named it so with a smile. After drinking it, you'll have the strength of an ox and the speed of a horse. Lucien said it would be on sale later at the 7th workshop. Flint sneered at Gryffindor's brooms. Comets and cleansweeps, huh? Good for sweeping floors, maybe, but for Quidditch. He stroked the Nimbus 2001 in his hands like a prized animal. One should use a real broom. Insults began to fly. Hermione and Ron came down from the stands to listen. Hermione looked straight at Flint even when she noticed Malfoy was dozing. Unafraid, she said, if the outcome could be decided by whose broom is more expensive, there'd be no point in playing. You could just line up your fastest brooms and be done. I don't believe Gryffindor's players need shiny broomsticks to be the Gryffindors cheered. The Weasley twins whistled and called out in unison. That's right. Hope those shiny brooms can comfort your little hearts. Flint's expression turned ugly. He leaned forward, grin gone, and spat. You sharp-tongued little girl. I thought those big front teeth would affect your speech, huh? You filthy. His voice hardened into the slur that made the whole field go quiet. Mudblood. The word hit like a curse. Silence fell over the pitch. Malfoy, half asleep, blinked and felt as if he'd missed something and also avoided something terrible. Mudblood, that one filthy, contemptuous word, had been thrown out into the open. Before anything else could happen, there was a dull, explosive snap and a shout of pain. Ah, my broom! Malfoy turned to see Ron Weasley standing with something odd in his hands, an alchemy-made device that acted like a small compressed air gun. It had fired a powerful blast that sent Flint's Nimbus 2001 snapping into pieces. Flint had been several meters away, kneeling and cradling the broken broom in his hands. For a moment, Malfoy forgot the insult and only thought, this thing is useful. Maybe he should get one too. Later, in the Great Hall at lunch, Malfoy and Lucien sat in a corner of the long table with their plates. Malfoy was animated, recounting the morning's chaos. Flint flew up at that moment, Malfoy said between bites. Don't tell me, Weasley's air gun is pretty interesting, but of course, it's because you taught him how to make it, Lucien. Isn't there something like this among muggles, a metal wand? Lucien picked up a piece of roast duck and muttered, they call it a gun. Malfoy explained the fracas. After the broom broke, everything went wild. Some people fought with fists, some with wands. Someone nearly smashed another Nimbus. It was total chaos. Ron's airgun made a mess of things too. He spooned Mapo tofu into his mouth and grinned. We all ended up blasting at each other. Lucien listened, thoughtful. In his head, he traced the incidents back. His reinforced flying car had earlier saved Ron's wand from being damaged, so Ron had been able to use it later, and Ron's airgun, an alchemy contraption, had been a clever, non-wand way of intervening. It was only a small twist from traditional wizard dueling, but effective. Malfoy bobbed his head and added, I was half asleep, actually. I didn't say mudblood like in the usual stories. Flint said it. Then Weasley pulled something out, and Granger threw several charms into the crowd. I think they hit Flint. Lucien nodded. Hermione had taken her revenge in the moment. That was fitting. That word is very nasty, Lucien agreed quietly. Mudblood was one of those insults aimed at muggle-born witches and wizards with a cruelty that stung like something personal. It's Flint's fault, Malfoy said, disgust curling his lips. He's crude and stupid. He relies on brute force and has no foresight. They both went quiet for a beat. We all got lectured by our deans, Malfoy went on in a lower voice. Professor Snape gave Flint detention, a severe one. The dean looked terrifying. We'd never seen him so angry. Lucien's eyebrows rose. He'd never thought Snape would blow up, but hearing that made sense. Snape hated that slur perhaps more than any of them, and more than that, he hated the idea of it being thrown around in his domain. Malfoy sighed. I just joined the team and haven't had official practice yet. And now the captain is gone. He looked annoyed. You don't have a vice captain? Lucien asked. No, Malfoy scowled. Flint's conceded. He won't let anyone interfere with his command. Lucien shrugged. Then organize the others and practice. You were very familiar with Quidditch when we were training. Malfoy's face lit up. He had loved Quidditch since he was a child. His family had the means to indulge that interest, and he'd learned quickly. Lucien had seen potential in him during the special sessions. Maybe Malfoy had been overeager. He had pushed for the seeker spot, trading favors and support to secure it, but he knew his way around a broom. Taking charge of practice while Flint was detained wasn't the same as being captain, but it was authority of a sort. It would be a chance to show up Gryffindor, too. Malfoy couldn't help a smug little grin. You? He said incredulously, pointing to himself. Me? Lead? Lucien gave him a small approving nod and then a softer compliment. You have insight, you understand technique, and you supplied the team with good brooms. They'll respect you. It's just daily practice. And if the old ones don't give way, how will the young ones rise? Ambition flared in Malfoy then. The Slytherin gleam that liked power and the smell of progress. He had no chance to be permanent captain with Flint only temporarily out. But the opportunity to direct team training, to boss others around, to stand at the center of what mattered, that was irresistible. He resolved, with the certainty of the self-important, that he would lead practice and make sure everyone noticed him. If anyone could outshine Potter, he would do it on the pitch. Lucien, do you have a formal robe for the award ceremony? Harry rubbed his unruly black hair as he wandered the castle corridor after visiting his injured teammates in the hospital wing. What should have been a normal Quidditch practice had escalated into something like a wizarding brawl. Professor McGonagall had been furious. Such a mass fight hadn't happened in years, but when she learned what had caused it, she became even angrier. She stormed out of her office, saying she was going to Snape to demand an explanation. How could such blatant discrimination be allowed at Hogwarts? In the end, McGonagall only symbolically confiscated Ron's airgun and sent him and Hagrid to patrol the Forbidden Forest for half a day. She didn't press Flint about his injuries or offer compensation for the damaged broom. Given Ron and Hagrid's relationship, it was little more than a day trip with a friend, and they left in daylight, so it wasn't taken very seriously. Ron had rushed off to Hagrid's hut, muttering excitedly about finding materials in the forest to build a new airgun and tinkering with extra features. Harry didn't know whether to warn him. Ron was slowly becoming more like Mr. Weasley. Both of them loved modifying odd and wonderful things. Hermione, though, had left Harry with a headache. Her eyes had been red when she found him. Harry had assumed she was upset about being called mudblood. He hadn't known the term before, but after Ron explained its viciousness, Harry understood how outrageous Flint had been. He'd worried about how to comfort Hermione, only for her to ask a baffling question. Could Harry brew a potion to change someone's teeth? At first, Harry was bewildered. Then he realized Hermione might be upset because Flint had sneered at her front teeth. As a friend, he promised to look through the books for anything that might help. Hermione thanked him, and to his surprise, said he didn't need to help her get back at Flint. She'd thrown a handful of charms at the scoundrel right on the spot, and if he dared insult her again, she'd use the methods Lucien had taught her to show arrogant fools the power of knowledge. Harry believed her. He'd seen how fast Hermione could wave her wand, and he knew Lucien liked to say, knowledge equals power. It was certainly true in the magical world. Harry realized he still hadn't asked Lucien what had happened when Lucien came back from the pitch on a broom that morning. He didn't even know where Lucien was now. Headmaster's office. Despite the Quirrell incident back in first year, Lucien and Dumbledore had kept up the tradition of afternoon tea every week. Lucien pushed several packets of candies and snacks across to Dumbledore, who took an interested look. Principal, these are sweets I made. Would you like to try some? Dumbledore picked up a packet, examined it, and said, They look delicious. Is there an unexpected change after eating them? Dumbledore had no trouble recognizing the special nature of the confections. He wasn't an amateur with potions and alchemy. Lucien had expected as much. Dumbledore popped a yellow, disc-shaped candy into his mouth, chewed, and said approvingly, "Ah, lemon! Not bad." The next instant, his hair and beard, previously silver, flashed bright yellow, matching his robes. Dumbledore chuckled and stroked his beard, delighted. He took a purple candy and ate it. His hair and beard went purple. Soon he had polished off the packet and asked Lucien what they were. "Skittles," Lucien said. "The colors match the flavors. They're basically hair-dyeing potions in candy form. Well, you've just seen the effect." Dumbledore reached for the next packet, which looked elastic. "These are QQ candies," Lucien began, after eating them. But Dumbledore was already testing one. Once swallowed, his fingers stretched like rubber. Unlike the Skittles, the QQ candies had the same rubbery effect regardless of color, but Dumbledore kept eating them with childlike glee until the packet was nearly empty. He truly loved them, an old man with a sweet tooth and the emotional range of a child. Lucien glanced at the colorful crystal ball in his pocket. It collected emotional traces silently, material useful for the Philosopher's Stone, and he could sense the vibrant feelings pouring from Dumbledore. Dumbledore, popping another candy into his mouth, said, "They taste great, and the effects are very entertaining. If I like them, children certainly will." He grinned and added, "Lucien, you've invented quite a few alchemy items and potions this semester, and you even got the Weasley brothers to help sell them. You've learned a lot from Nicholas, haven't you?" Lucien refilled Dumbledore's teacup with honey water and answered, "My teacher's guidance has helped me a great deal." Dumbledore smiled. "When Nicholas wrote to me saying you would be his last student, I was surprised. I thought, after all, that he would turn his gaze to the heavens and no longer concern himself with worldly affairs." Dumbledore knew of Flamel's regret that he had never found a suitable heir for his knowledge of alchemy. From Nicholas's letter, Dumbledore understood he viewed Lucien as a true successor. The headmaster was pleased on both counts, an old friend finding someone to pass his knowledge to, and a young man eager to learn. "By the way, Lucien, those 2 transfiguration papers you wrote over the summer are about to be accepted for review in Transfiguration today." Lucien allowed himself a small smile. Dumbledore continued, leaning forward, a twinkle in his eye. "At your age, having papers in an authoritative journal is quite something." Then, Dumbledore added another matter that required his attention as chief warlock of the Wizengamot. "Lucien, you should have a formal robe, the kind worn for awards." Lucien blinked. A robe? An award? He thought about the Transfiguration papers. If there was an award connected to them, it would likely be from Transfiguration Today, the most authoritative body in the field. Winning would raise his reputation and help sell his alchemy and potion products. He remembered reading about a tangible prize from that association, the Ring of All Things, a magical item with some rather remarkable functions he longed to study. "Principal, I actually have the robe you mentioned. I had one custom made at Twilfit and Tadding's in Diagon Alley. And are you referring to the Ring of All Things from the Transfiguration Today Association?" Lucien asked. Dumbledore nodded. There was that award, and perhaps another, something Dumbledore kept to surprise Lucien later, probably around Halloween or Christmas. "By the way, Lucien, what do you think of the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor?" Dumbledore asked. Lucien didn't bother to be tactful. Did Dumbledore really need to ask about Lockhart? "Principal, Professor Lockhart hasn't actually taught defensive magic yet. Not for our year, and from what I can tell, not for the upper years either. He mostly talks about the books he's written and gets students to perform. That doesn't seem what a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher should be doing, does it?" Lucien added. Dumbledore folded his hands, calm. "Every teacher has his own style. Professor Lockhart has rich experiences and has faced many dark creatures. Those experiences are worth learning from." Lucien looked into Dumbledore's bright blue eyes and sighed. He couldn't believe Dumbledore didn't see Lockhart's superficiality. With Dumbledore's wisdom and years, how could he not detect the problems with that man's reputation? People needed confidence, but Lockhart's foundation could not support his claims. After a moment's silence, Dumbledore picked up a candy and said slowly, "Besides magic, students learn other things here. Responsibilities and virtues, certainly, but also lessons from negative examples. Lucien, I understand your dissatisfaction. You want meaningful knowledge. If Professor Lockhart cannot provide it, You can always ask me during afternoon tea. Lucien pressed the matter. Principal, I'm happy to learn from you. But what about the others? I believe Hogwarts should be a place of learning for everyone. Are you really willing to let a liar take an entire academic year to teach, supposedly so students can learn life lessons about honesty? He placed extra emphasis on the word liar. Lucien pointed out the practical problem. Fifth-year and seventh-year students were preparing for crucial exams that affected their futures, and defense against the dark arts mattered to those plans. Dumbledore's smile wavered. You must have heard something about the curse that affects the defense against the dark arts post. It's true. So people are afraid to take the position, and it's difficult to recruit teachers each year. This year, Lucien trailed off, and Dumbledore shook his head. This year, only one person applied, Lockhart. Lucien could think of another likely candidate, Snape, but he suspected Dumbledore was unwilling to push Snape into the role because of other obligations. If Dumbledore wouldn't replace Lockhart, Lucien decided he would find another way to hasten Lockhart's retirement and make room for a competent teacher. Given Lockhart's obsession with the diary and his tendency to overplay things, it might happen sooner than later. Thinking Dumbledore understood the situation, Lucien continued, "Then there's not much else to be done. You have your difficulties." Dumbledore took a comforting sip of honey water. Lucien's next line nearly made him cough. So, Principal, you could begin looking for a new defense against the dark arts professor earlier, right? The curse usually limits someone to a year at most, and Lockhart might retire even earlier. We should prepare. Dumbledore considered the suggestion. Chatting moved on to the morning's brawl between Gryffindor and Slytherin, plainly a case of pure-blood prejudice against Muggle-borns and half-bloods. Lucien warned that the pure-blood families might come to Hogwarts to make trouble. Dumbledore assured him that as long as he was headmaster, pure-blood discourse would not dominate the school. Lucien believed him. Even if powerful pure-blood families were unhappy, they wouldn't dare risk truly overturning Dumbledore's authority. When he bid Dumbledore farewell, Lucien left the office and made his way through the castle, greeting people as he passed. He spotted Lockhart strutting by in a dazzling silver-blue robe that forced others to squint. Lockhart's chest was covered in medals, and prominently displayed was the Order of Merlin, 3rd class. Lucien noted the golden, cross-shaped starburst of the medal, and a thought struck him. If the award for transfiguration could elevate one standing so visibly, might he, too, one day receive the Order of Merlin for his achievements? 1 in 90. Order of Merlin? Lucien brushed past Lockhart in the corridor, turning over the idea of the Order of Merlin in his mind. Merlin had founded the Order in the mid-11th century as the earliest magical organization in the wizarding world, originally intending wizards to help non-magical people. The Medal of the Order of Merlin had long since become one of the wizarding world's most prestigious honors. Since the 15th century, it had been awarded by the Wizengamot. Anyone who had made a genuine contribution to the wizarding world could potentially receive an Order of Merlin. Lucien thought of the wizards he knew who already held 2nd and 3rd class medals. Newt Scamander had a 2nd class order for his work in magizoology. No one could credibly claim to be more authoritative on magical creatures than Newt. Lockhart's 3rd class medal had been given for his published methods of defending against dark creatures. The exploits he described might not all have been his, but the techniques themselves were real enough to teach others something useful. That dissemination of knowledge could be counted as a contribution. Lucien reviewed his own credentials. He had written 2 papers, one on transfiguration superposition, a thorough development of an existing field, and another on magical creature transfiguration, a genuinely new direction for transfiguration. Not everyone could apply it, but the theoretical layers in the paper could open whole new avenues for those who understood it. That, too, was a contribution. He only wondered how the Wizengamot judged and ranked such achievements. Dumbledore was the current chief warlock of the Wizengamot, after all, so why not ask him? When Lucien had raised the topic earlier, Dumbledore had seemed oddly hesitant, as if he hadn't said everything he might. If Lucien actually obtained an Order of Merlin, Even a third or second class, it would lift his reputation considerably and naturally boost sales of his alchemical and potion products. He ought to apparate off campus soon to check on his shops and restock. Lucien's apparition was convenient. He could slip away for a weekend without fuss. A first-class order, he knew, was unlikely. Comparing recipients, he found a pattern. The highest-level award usually accompanied saving many lives or resolving a major crisis in the wizarding world. Dumbledore's medal followed his defeat of Gellert Grindelwald. Arabella Nutley had earned one for repairing the Roman Colosseum with a reparo charm after a broomstick-racing crowd had damaged it, preventing a Muggle discovery. The Toke family had earned theirs for saving many Muggles during the Ilfracombe incident in 1932. Sometimes the medal was given posthumously for acts like Norval Twonk's rescue of a Muggle child from a manticore. And of course, there were the exceptions. Ministers for magic often awarded themselves first-class medals before retirement. In short, to get a first-class order while alive, you either had to stop a world-shaking crisis or be minister. Lucien smiled at the absurd thought. Was he expected to single-handedly blast Lord Voldemort into dust on live television once the Dark Lord returned? He shook his head and headed for the Weasley twins' shop to check recent business. A single thought slid into his mind then, like a stray line of dialogue from Lockhart. Controlling monsters to create chaos, a dramatic, visible adventure that saves a band of young wizards, saving the future and hope of the wizarding world. Lucien stopped and glanced back at Lockhart's retreating figure. Ah, yes. Lockhart had said something like that. By October, the weather had turned cold and damp. Colds rippled through the castle. Sneezes and coughs echoed constantly, until Madame Pomfrey brewed an effective cold potion that, oddly, left the drinker's ears steaming for several hours. The sneezes lessened, and the castle grew misty, as if a dream had settled over it. Students with steaming ears walked the corridors. Some shrugged it off with a laugh, others blushed and hid their faces behind books or scarves. Lucien made a mental note. A cold cure without such an obvious side effect would sell well. Seasonal stock, easy to produce. Outside it poured. Harry pushed his hand up and showed an azure bracelet on his wrist. Phew, the rain's been endless lately. Good thing for your waterproof charm bracelets, Lucien. Otherwise, we'd be soaked and muddy after practice. Lucien looked at the bracelet. The frequent storms weren't just Britain's weather. Ethel, the Thunderbird cub Lucien had brought back from Arizona, couldn't sit still. Lucien often let him out of his enclosure to soar, and when Thunderbirds flew, they gathered storms. That, plus ordinary rain, made training miserable. Lucien had designed the waterproof charm bracelet to help. It combined a waterproofing charm and a scouring charm into an alchemical bracelet that automatically cast protection over the wearer. No umbrella or extra spell needed. Quidditch teams bought them in droves, and other young wizards followed suit. They weren't expensive, and the convenience sold itself. Lucien enjoyed the gratitude he received. Such things had earned him loyalty. Indeed, Malfoy drawled nearby. Thanks to Lucien's invention, it's so much more convenient when I lead the team for training. Harry snapped, annoyed. Since Flint had been placed in detention and Quidditch practice had been interrupted, Malfoy had started pretending he led Slytherin's practice. Whenever they met, Malfoy found some way to boast about it 3 to 5 times. Isn't your captain's detention over yet? Harry demanded. Malfoy laughed and shrugged, feigning despair. Who knows? Dean's got all sorts of responsibilities. Too many toads, rats, bats, and whatnot. Defense against the dark arts professor's office smelled faintly of cologne and old paper. Lockhart's diary lay open on the desk. He scribbled in it with a bright peacock quill and sometimes talked aloud to himself. That monster won't kill anyone, will it? He muttered. I just want a big story. I don't plan to go to Azkaban. That would be a terrible experience to brag about later. That thing looks scary. It's huge. Couldn't it eat someone? Lockhart penned his fears. Each time his handwriting faded from the page as if the ink were being swallowed, and within a few seconds new words would appear in the same place. That handwriting, cool, precise, read, "That's a basilisk. According to my method, you can control it completely. Don't worry, as long as you don't look directly into the basilisk's eyes, the worst is petrification. Petrification can be cured. At most, you'll be bedridden for a few months. Besides, no one will know you caused the chaos. The world will remember Gilderoy Lockhart, the man who subdued the basilisk, saved Hogwarts, protected young wizards, and became a hero. Praise, adoration, honor, fame, you'll have it all. Lockhart's breath quickened, and he wrote, hesitating, "Tom, but I'm still worried." As his ink hit the page, imperceptible wisps of life and soul seemed to be drawn from him with the ink, sinking into the diary. Those threads traveled inward to a strange room within the book. Inside, the diary contained a circular, roomy chamber filled with odd silver devices and hung with many empty picture frames. A sorting hat slouched on a shelf. The arrangement recalled a headmaster's office, though the furnishings weren't those of Dumbledore's current room. Lounging in a large armchair was a boy of about 16 or 17, black hair, dark eyes, pale face, though his features were slightly blurred. An open diary lay before him. It looked new, as if just taken into use. Lockhart's ink had written itself across the pages. The black-haired boy, Tom, sniffed and said, "Still too little life force and soul energy." His features sharpened as he read Lockhart's words and then curled into a mocking sneer. He understood Lockhart's needs perfectly, a craving for fame, a visible adventure. Under that hunger, Lockhart had accepted the suggestion of using a basilisk to manufacture a crisis. But when Lockhart actually confronted the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, he'd panicked. He hesitated at the crucial moment, unsure whether to unleash the beast or control it to cause panic and then stage his heroic defeat. That hesitation had slowed the flow of life and soul Tom needed. This Tom was only a fragment, a portion of soul trapped inside the diary, left there when Tom Riddle had been 16. Merged with the diary, it had become a Horcrux. If he could absorb enough life and soul from others, he might restore himself, complete the fragment, and reclaim a body. Once whole, he could reappear and perhaps even merge with his main self. No, he thought to himself. I am myself, not yet merging. I will watch. I wonder if the main part has reached the pinnacle, if he's become headmaster, if he rules the wizarding world. Tom picked up his quill and wrote in Lockhart's diary in looping script. Gilderoy, my friend, if you're uncertain, we can experiment with animals first and see if the basilisk obeys you. The handwriting dissipated from the notebook's page, as always. The suggestion ensured the plan's smooth start. Tom would have the basilisk comply with Lockhart's staged heroics, and once he absorbed enough life and soul, it would be time for the fake to become real. If many young wizards died at Hogwarts, Dumbledore would be disgraced and could be removed from the headmastership. Tom remembered fiery things, Dumbledore's spectacular rescue when he'd been taken from the orphanage, and how Dumbledore had watched him with suspicion even while others praised him. The thought of that narrow-minded old man standing in his way stoked his resentment. He wanted a body, and he wanted Dumbledore out. As the words materialized, Lockhart gripped his peacock quill, visibly uneasy. Experiment with animals, he wrote aloud. Students have pets, and there's even a stray cat roaming the school. Tsk, how can a respectable school have such a dirty stray cat? 191. Lockhart's Adventure. Harry took a few deep breaths, feeling the quill in his pocket. He raised his hand and knocked on Lockhart's office door. "Oh, is that Harry? Come in, come in." The door opened at once. Lockhart sat at his desk, as always, signing books and letters with a flamboyant peacock feather quill. He flashed his practiced smile and waved Harry over. "Today should be your last detention, right? We've had such a wonderful time together this past month. If you find the taste of fame intoxicating, you're welcome to come help me answer my fans anytime." Harry felt sick. If he hadn't caused so much trouble at the start of the year, he wouldn't have been punished for so long. Most of his detentions had been spent helping Lockhart sign replies. He was tired of even seeing the name Gilderoy Lockhart. Forcing a shy, awkward smile, he sat opposite the professor and slipped his hand into his pocket, fingers closing on a familiar quill. It was a transcription quill he'd been given by Lucien, simple magic that copied whatever it was pointed at. Perfect for Lockhart's tedious task, Harry only had to pretend to hold it. A stack of books on the desk conveniently shielded the action. Harry noticed a new hourglass sitting on the stack. He hadn't seen it before. Lockhart followed his gaze and smiled. "You know, I get so many letters, so many admirers. I sometimes forget the time. We can't let their enthusiasm cool, can we? This hourglass helps me keep track." As he spoke, Lockhart flipped the hourglass. The tiny sound of sand beginning to run was a soft, steady whisper in the quiet office. Harry grunted, half listening, and bent his head over the fan mail, syrupy, breathless adoration and ludicrous questions. Lockhart rambled on in his usual theatrical way. "Fame is like a fickle friend," he said. "A celebrity must keep a celebrity's poise." For some reason, the sound of the sand and Lockhart's voice together made Harry's eyelids heavy. He tried to fight it, but the drowsiness swept over him, and, clang, his forehead hit the desk. Lockhart's eyes lit up when Harry slumped forward. He tapped the hourglass and, as if on cue, the sand running inside stopped dead. Lockhart took an old diary from his drawer, slipped it into his robes, and glanced at the sleeping boy before hurrying out. He was headed for the Chamber of Secrets. Following the instructions in the diary, Tom Riddle's little book, Lockhart had found himself a perfect alibi, a child who came to his office regularly. The hourglass was one of Lockhart's more convenient acquisitions. He liked to borrow other wizards' experiences. Sometimes he took physical evidence, too. If the original owners no longer remembered what had happened, keeping such items was apparently a matter of course. The hourglass's trick was straightforward. Anyone who heard its sand running, paired with a few words from the owner, could be put into a deep sleep. Lockhart assumed he could open the chamber, release the basilisk, get back before anybody suspected, wake Harry, and then keep the boy quiet long enough to make his story stick. After all, Harry was only a child. Lockhart didn't notice a small bat that trailed him out of the office. It was only natural to see bats around at this time. Halloween was near. He arrived at the girls' lavatory where Moaning Myrtle dwelt, and following Tom's instructions, spritzed a potion to mask ghostly perception, just in case. He pressed the diary against a particular tap, and after a moment, a dark entrance yawned open. He swallowed and jumped in. A bat that had been hidden nearby fluttered, changed midair into a moth, and dove into the opening. Lockhart followed the path the diary described, and soon stood before a massive sculpted door. He pressed the diary against it, and the door rumbled open with an all-too-familiar motion. From inside came a long, scraping sound, and then a dazzling green snake slid out. It was enormous. Lockhart felt cold sweat run down his spine. He stared down at his feet, refusing to meet the reptile's gaze, and held the diary above his head until the beast, after a slow moment, slithered away and vanished into a pipe. Lockhart staggered back out of the chamber, gulping air and wiping his brow. A few minutes later, the chamber fell quiet. The moth that had slipped in earlier fluttered down, and in the blink of an eye, transformed into a young man with dark green eyes. Lucien summoned Liu Guang. The little Qilin appeared beside him, and its presence seemed to banish the chill and darkness. "Master, it's so dirty here," the little creature complained. Lucien patted the Qilin's neck. "We'll purify it in a moment. First, leave a spatial mark so we can come directly next time." Liu Guang set the mark, and Lucien teleported away. He appeared again in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Harry, why are you asleep? Studying too hard?" Lockhart's voice said, and Harry blinked awake. "Ah, was I asleep?" He sat up, adjusted his glasses, and noticed the hourglass on the desk. Only a little sand had flowed. "You just dozed for a moment," Lockhart said, feigning concern. "Young people must take care of themselves. You'll need a healthy body when you become famous." Harry felt mortified. Dozing in front of a professor was embarrassing. Then a cold, venomous whisper seemed to crawl into his ear. "Let me kill you." Harry started, but no one else reacted. He looked around wildly, and then, as if in answer, the corridor's torches produced a dead, rigid shape. A stiff, gray cat hung from a torch bracket. Its yellow eyes were wide open and unblinking. Harry felt both unlucky and accused. He'd just finished his detention and was on his way back to the dormitory when he'd heard that same sinister whisper, the same voice from Lockhart's office, looping again in his head. The words about blood, slaughter, devouring filled him with dread. He feared some unknown monster was loose in the castle. Nearby, Filch stood with his face in his hands. Madame Norris, his only companion since he was a squib among wizards, hung motionless, terrifyingly stiff. Worse, the wall beside them was smeared in red words. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. The red letters were smeared as if written in blood. Filch wailed over his cat. More and more students gathered, drawn by his cries. Harry opened his mouth to explain, but no words came. That cold whisper seemed to be heard only by him. When he'd asked Lockhart in the office, the professor had said he'd heard nothing. Why would someone do this to my cat? Why would someone do this? Why? Filch's grief was raw and loud. Dumbledore arrived with several professors. The sight of blood-like writing and a motionless cat made a flash of concern cross his face. Filch, seeing Dumbledore, blurted accusations. Headmaster, someone, my cat was killed. It was Harry Potter, he was just... Dumbledore moved forward to examine Madame Norris. His half-moon spectacles caught the light, and his blue eyes softened. He raised a hand to calm Filch. Argus, Madame Norris is not dead. Filch shook his head in disbelief. But she has no breath, no heartbeat. She's so stiff, she was lively and nimble, just now. Tears overwhelmed him, and he broke down again. The watching students exchanged uneasy glances. Filch's tears were unexpected in someone usually so bitter. Yes, yes, Harry Potter, you say you didn't do it, but you were there? Did you see anything? Filch demanded, suspicion still tangled with his grief. Lockhart stepped in smoothly, taking Harry's arm and drawing him closer. His smile was gone. In its place was a pious, indignant expression, as if his very honor were engaged. Oh, Harry's been helping me answer fans' letters? Lockhart declared. He only finished a moment ago. He's just unlucky to have witnessed this distressing scene. Lockhart's claim served as an alibi. He held Harry's arm a little too tightly. The boy winced. Snape, who had been looking for fault, bristled at Lockhart's intervention. Lucien watched from the crowd with cold eyes, assessing. The performance was competent, but could have been more natural. If Lockhart had roared and boasted as usual, and then tied the event into one of his grand adventures, it would have fit people's expectations better. The alibi, however, was clever. Tom Riddle's diary had given Lockhart a tidy way to use Harry as cover. Lucien's mind flicked to the hourglass too. Hypnosis, interesting. Dumbledore surveyed the scene soberly. Madame Norris has been petrified, he announced. The word made Filch even more distraught. Who? Which student? Who wrote those blood words? Is this hatred of Muggleborns? Of squibs? Why? Dumbledore put a hand on his shoulder, speaking calmly. We can cure her. Do not suspect the students. This is a rare dark art. Students could not possibly master such a curse. He looked to Professor Sprout. I know of a potion that can reverse petrification. We must wait for the mandrakes at school to mature. Professor Sprout has already planted some. Lockhart's relief was visible. His affecting persona returned at once. I can brew it. Oh, I've brewed that potion hundreds of times in my sleep. Snape cut in, his voice cold. I am the potions professor. Lockhart, stung, shut his mouth and sank back into the crowd, suddenly much less conspicuous. Just then, a hand rose in the gathered students. Lucien pushed forward, producing a large glass jar from his robes filled with a rich, purplish-green liquid. If you need mandrake juice, I have some here, he offered. Dumbledore's eyes brightened. That's wonderful, Lucien. You've contributed to the school. He beckoned Lucien forward and, under the circumstances, welcomed the aid. The headmaster's calm exterior masked the urgency of resolving such a malicious incident quickly. Professor, would you like to test whether this mandrake juice is suitable? Lucien asked, offering the jar to Sprout. Professor Sprout hesitated, then took the jar. Her eyelids twitched, wondering how many mandrakes this boy had cultivated. The quantity startled her. Lucien had always handled mandrakes deftly in herbology. Now it made more sense. He'd told the truth about raising them for potions and small items, he'd said. He wasn't careless. Sprout opened the jar and examined the liquid carefully. Lucien, you're raising so many mandrakes, she murmured. You must be careful. The adults. Lucien nodded. Don't worry, I'm using them for some potions and devices I've been making. I'm careful. Sprout finished her inspection. This mandrake juice is excellent, top grade. It will do perfectly for the potion. Relief spread among the teachers. For now, there would be a way to treat the petrified victims, if they could wait for the mandrakes to be processed. But Harry still felt unsettled. The cold whisper, the rigid cat, the smeared words on the wall. The castle felt less safe than it had that morning, and the faint image of a green-eyed young man and a moth slipping into a dark opening lingered in the back of his mind. "When do you think the antidote will be ready?" Dumbledore asked. "The mandrake extract is of good quality," Snape replied coolly. 2 days at most." As he took the jar of mandrake juice, he added, passing Lucien, "Come to my office afterward. I have something to discuss." Filch, who had been holding his breath since Lucien produced the remedy, finally sagged against the wall like a man who had run a marathon. He stared at Lucien with the kind of gratitude that can't be put into words. He couldn't do magic, he didn't know potions or herbs, but with Lucien's help, his cat had a chance. If they'd waited for the school-grown mandrakes to mature, Filch had been sure the cat would have died first. Lucien only smiled and nodded. Since he had mandrakes on hand, he might as well use them to save a cat. It wasn't about praise, it was about doing what needed to be done. Lockhart, hovering nearby with his usual theatrical disappointment at the lack of drama, watched as though someone had spoiled the script. The crisis never quite materialized. Lucien's memory flicked back to what he'd overheard in the staff room. From the way Lockhart had corresponded with Tom's diary, Tom had promised stones and headlines rather than murder. Petrify, not kill. That suited Lockhart's nerves and ambition perfectly. He wanted a spectacle, not a corpse. For Tom's diary, the sole fragment within it, the aim was to feed and grow, not to alienate an ally. A workable compromise, Lucien thought. Still, it didn't hurt to be cautious. Later, in Snape's office, Lucien busied himself with preparing the remaining ingredients while the potions master watched. "Professor," Lucien said, "why are Hogwarts mandrakes the only ones anyone uses? Aren't there other suppliers? If the school's plants aren't ready yet, why wait?" Snape gave him a hard look. "You don't think mandrakes are easy to cultivate, do you?" Lucien paused. In the game he'd been playing, if it could be called that, he'd earned a diligent little gardener bonus that removed the scream penalty from handling mandrake roots, increased yields, and shortened growth cycles. Combine that with a few potions, and cultivation seemed straightforward. But Snape's expression told him the man had a point. "Hogwarts is the largest supplier in Britain," Snape said. "The Ministry and many shops in Diagon Alley source from here. Besides, it isn't mandrake season, for you to have fresh extract now." He waved a hand as if dismissing the rest. "Never mind. You have your methods. Don't waste effort in needless secrecy. You have talent. Practice properly." Snape's eyes lingered on Lucien's hands as they quartered and measured on the classical rhythm of his technique. "The method you're using is rather old-fashioned." "I learned it from my teacher over the summer," Lucien answered truthfully. The techniques had come from Nicholas Flamel. Alchemy and potioncraft overlap, and Flamel had been a surprisingly good instructor. Snape's frown deepened. He'd expected modern approaches from a Hogwarts student, not archaic methods associated with a reclusive master. The office quieted to the soft rustle of herbs being prepped. After a moment, Snape asked abruptly, "Lucien, who do you think is behind this?" Lucien felt, for an instant, as if someone had thrown a stone into still water. Was this the major plotline this year? He kept cutting the roots, calm by habit. "You have a suspect?" Snape sneered, set down his own tools, and scrubbed his hands. "Every year new people come through these doors. Some are students, and some are newly appointed professors." He said the last word with a slow, measured emphasis that made the air between them chill. Lucien knew who Snape meant, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and caught the hard edge of resentment in the man's voice. Snape's instincts were sharp. The implication that a colleague might be involved did not surprise him. "If it's the defense professor you suspect," Lucien said, "why not tell Dumbledore?" Snape answered while beginning to place the herbs into a cauldron. "Dumbledore pays me a potions professor's salary. The protection of the school is the headmaster's concern." There was a tone beneath those words, bitter, resigned. Snape had watched Quirrell carefully last year, partly because Dumbledore asked him to, and partly to protect Harry. But he was clever enough to see the pattern. Dumbledore often tolerated danger so that certain pupils might gain experience. Snape had probably realized that an outright complaint would be quietly ignored if Dumbledore believed the risk manageable. Lucien thought of the Sorting Hat, Fawkes, and the miraculous timing that had saved Harry before. Dumbledore, it seemed, always held the reins. This year, however, Lucien intended to take matters into his own hands if necessary. He even considered testing the sorting hat to see whether it would offer the Gryffindor sword should he need it against whatever serpent might be used. "Do you know what the Chamber of Secrets means?" Lucien asked. Snape paused as if he'd rehearsed the answer already. "You should know the history of the four founders," he said. Slytherin and Gryffindor had their disagreements. Slytherin wished to admit only pure bloods, fearing that Muggle-borns could not be trusted. Lucien finished the thought. If a child born to Muggles attracted attention, it could endanger the school, so Slytherin built a secret chamber, reopened only by his true heir. Supposedly, that heir could release a terrible creature to expel those he deemed unworthy. "So you think the so-called heir will control the monster to target Muggle-born students like me?" Lucien asked. "No one knows if the legend's literal truth holds," Snape said. "Someone could be exploiting the myth to create panic. Once the antidote is made, people will calm down, but until we know who is doing this, be careful." Lucien bowed his head. "I understand. Thank you, Professor." Snape did not look convinced. "I'm not concerned about you," he said flatly. "It's rare to find a student who actually understands potions techniques. I don't want others to assume my lessons produce failures." He looked up, sharp and unmistakable. "Also, avoid Harry Potter. He's a magnet for trouble." Lucien suppressed a smile. If anyone deserved to be called a magnet for trouble, it'd be Lockhart wishing he had Harry's adventures. "Understood. I'll brew an antidote as well. Regular class assignments don't showcase my true skill." Snape grunted and returned to his work. Later, Lucien slipped into the Forbidden Forest. He was hunting thestral habitats for tail feathers, materials he hoped would make a device or charm to neutralize the basilisk's lethal gaze. If he could design something that reflected or filtered the instant death effect, something like a water reflection or a camera's shutter, then a victim would only be petrified, not destroyed. "Liu Guang, are the thestrals nearby?" he whispered. The small voice in his head replied, familiar and amused. "Yes, Master. I've seen them here before." Liu Guang rose, concealed herself high in the trees, then let Lucien move forward. Thestrals are invisible to most who haven't witnessed death. Lucien could see them, however, inky, elongated horses with glossy black coats that made them look like moving shadows. Their heads were oddly reptilian, with pale, pupilless eyes, and bat-like wings clung to their flanks. A human figure stood among them. Long, dark, golden-brown hair fell over slender shoulders. A radish-shaped earring glinted in the gloom. She was barefoot, one delicate hand outstretched to stroke a thestral's neck. The animal lowered its head and nudged against her palm without fear. "Luna Lovegood." Lucien's mouth curved. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" she said in her soft, airy voice, turning to him. Her silver-gray eyes were dreamlike but steady. "You can see them too?" she asked, surprised, then smiled. "We met at the Weasleys. What are you doing here?" Lucien reached out and touched a thestral's forehead. It welcomed the contact. "I need their feathers. I'm working on something to protect against, well, a particular sort of gaze." Luna nodded as if that made perfect sense. "I'm looking for my shoes," she said, glancing down at her bare feet. "I think the blibbering humdingers have them." Lucien blinked. "Blibbering humdingers?" "They live in damp corners," Luna explained gravely. "They're shy. They gather little things they like with their mucus. My shoes were probably the prettiest yellow thing they'd ever seen." She looked rueful but unhurried, as if her day contained room for both strange beasts and misplaced footwear. Lucien found himself smiling. In a world that might very soon be threatened by legend made real, her calm made the forest less frightening. He set about collecting what he needed, Liu Guang's presence comforting at his back, while Luna continued to murmur to the thestrals as though their company were the most normal thing in the world. 193. Flying Unicorn. The wind stirred the trees at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Lucien stood watching the small, odd little girl in front of him. What was she seeing? Rackspurts? One of those creatures only Luna ever noticed, like the blibbering humdingers? Maybe. Luna did have a habit of seeing things other people didn't. He still remembered the odd episode at the burrow. "Achoo!" Luna sneezed suddenly, rubbing her reddened little nose. Lucien took out his wand and idly summoned 2 fallen leaves. transfiguring them into a pair of pure white rabbit slippers that appeared at her feet. Put them on first. Luna slipped her feet into them obediently and stomped twice. The rabbit ears on the toes waggled. Thank you, Lucien. Why did you make them rabbit shoes? Lucien smiled and nodded toward her earrings. Aren't there carrots on them? Luna cocked her head and looked at him with her dark green eyes. I thought you'd call me Loony, since you don't have to walk this far to find shoes. The Forbidden Forest is still dangerous for first-year little wizards. Dangerous, Lucien thought. He remembered his 7 trips in and out of the forest last year and hadn't met anything especially threatening. Loony? Do people really call you that? Luna nodded, but she spoke without any hurt, as if narrating an unrelated fact. Yes, maybe because of my words, my thoughts, my clothes. People think I'm special, strange. Her serene, unaffected way of speaking, so unlike most children, only made Lucien more curious. We're Ravenclaw, he said softly. Aren't little eagles supposed to be a bit different? That was true. Ravenclaw had the fewest students and the most oddballs. They loved knowledge and sometimes thought in ways others didn't. Luna still looked up at him. Special? Then you must be the most special of us, and you get along well with others, which makes you even more special. Actually, I came because I wanted to see a unicorn, she added. A few days ago, I thought I saw a flying unicorn on the edge of the forest. Maybe I was wrong, but if I come back today, I might see it again. A flying unicorn. Lucien's expression shifted. He didn't think Luna had invented another invisible creature. He knew exactly the unicorn she meant. A white shape descended from the sky, silver light wings shimmering at its shoulder blades, a sacred, pure glow around it. Aurora, Lucien called it with a smile. Aurora, the foal Lucien had rescued last winter, had grown so much over the past year. At his voice, she trotted up, rubbing her head against his cheek. Lucien stroked her neck and watched the silver wing light at her shoulders fade into a subtle wing pattern across her flanks. After he had used the magic weaving technique to repair Aurora's damaged magical circuit, the subsequent stabilization treatments had changed her. Her golden foal coat had become white, and the patterns had become clearer, revealing new abilities. Infusing magic into those markings could make them into wings of light and let her fly. It was another proof of what the magic weaving technique could do. Thinking of it reminded him of Norbert. His dragon had grown too, and it was time to tweak his magical circuit with the same method. If the changes stayed within the bounds of a Norwegian ridgeback, the system said it would be fine. To raise Norbert toward being the best of his kind, Lucien would need to give him more magical capacities. Luna, is this the unicorn you saw? He asked. Luna looked between him and Aurora, puzzled for a moment. Yes, a winged unicorn. But I've read in books that unicorns only let witches, or rather pure maidens, approach. Touching one is even harder. Lucien, aren't you an older student? She added suddenly, covering her tiny mouth as if she'd said something surprising. Her eyes lit with a new idea. My father said unicorns don't see with their eyes, but with moonlight. Your soul must be full of moonlight, much more than ordinary people. They can recognize it. Moonlight, Lucien thought. Luna always had an odd, internally consistent theory ready. He smiled at the strange, wonderful knowledge in her head. By the way, he asked casually, the things you said you saw around me at the Weasleys, Eton, what did you mean by that? Luna shook her head. Her voice sounded distant. I seem to have forgotten, but now you have many more around you. I know them all. The thinking moths, the orb ants, the mood ducks. She paused and then smiled up at him. Lucien, you're very happy at Hogwarts, aren't you? You like it here. He was pulled briefly from his search for Luna's strange creatures. Like Hogwarts? Of course, too many fascinating things to learn. He nodded. Yes, I'm very happy here. Luna chuckled softly and seemed pleased. That's wonderful. Lucien, her name is Aurora, right? May I play with her for a while? You'll have to ask Aurora, he said. Lucien spoke with the unicorn, and as he expected, Aurora consented. Then Lucien traded with the Thestrals, special food and grooming for the feathers they left in their nests, and collected a cold, dark tail feather. Holding it, he breathed out softly. The feather would serve as a small insurance against the basilisk, he thought, and added it to his pocket. In another pocket of space, Trunk World, Lucien stood beside Ethel, his Thunderbird little brother, who was busy protesting. Good boy, just one more feather, Lucien coaxed. Boss, you said that yesterday. If you keep plucking like this, how will I find a mate? Athel complained. Lucien paused. How far ahead was a Thunderbird thinking? They didn't even consider mating until they were 20. Ahem, Athel, you're only 10. You're young, no need to worry. With me, you'll live well. With these feathers, you'll stand out. One feather will grow back in a few days. Athel craned his neck, enjoying the scratching along his soft neck. But it still hurts a little when a feather is pulled out. Lucien changed the subject. What do you want for dinner tonight? Athel plucked a feather with his beak and handed it over. Salt and pepper lamb chops, please, boss. Lucien took the Thunderbird feather, shaking his head, and left that little pocket of space. Back in his alchemy workshop, he returned to the half-finished flying broomstick. He tapped materials with his wand. Components reformed and fitted into place. With the addition of the Thunderbird feather, the broom's surface whispered faintly of wind and thunder. Almost finished. Quidditch season started in November. He could make it in time. After charms, Lucien took the 3 younger students to the Great Hall for a meal. With no one close by, Hermione leaned in. Lucien, in History of Magic, Professor Binns talked about the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. She launched into a nearly word-for-word retelling of the ghost's lecture. Slytherin's chamber, the monster, the idea of targeting Muggleborns. Lucien listened. It matched what he'd already heard, the usual story of the founder, the monster, the supposed heir. As Hermione spoke, he noticed Ron staring at him expectantly. Last year, it had been Lucien's reading that had helped them uncover the Philosopher's Stone, so Ron looked to him now. Hey, Lucien, do you have any thoughts about this so-called heir of Slytherin? Lucien didn't answer outright. He knew about the diary fragment, knew Tom Riddle had been meddling with Lockhart, and he still had uses for Lockhart, and for the basilisk that would be involved. This time, he wanted them to solve it themselves. Still, he was curious where their suspicions would fall now that history had been tweaked. He turned the question back to Ron. Based on the clues you have, who do you suspect? Ron scratched his hair, uncertain. If the legend's right and the heir wants to target Muggleborns, then it has to be someone from Slytherin, right? The founder left the chamber. It gets passed down to Slytherin students to carry out his wish. Makes sense. But who exactly? He shrugged. Flint. He's annoying anyway. Harry interjected. That half-troll could strangle someone in person, but command a monster. I don't think he's clever enough. Hermione looked thoughtful. Maybe we could ask Malfoy or Daphne Greengrass to help. They're in Slytherin. They'd be convenient to question. They probably don't want to attack Muggleborns, do they? Harry finished. All 3 turned to Lucien again. He looked up at the ceiling, feeling the weight of their hopeful eyes. This wasn't how Harry Potter usually worked. Brainstorm, identify suspects, brew polyjuice to get close, stumble across Tom's diary, and set off a chain of events. With the changes he'd already made, Lucien wondered who they'd accuse this time. He couldn't help a small, wry smile. You could just ask Malfoy and Greengrass directly. Harry pushed his glasses up and looked worried. Malfoy might be in some mud. Flint's back to Quidditch and doesn't like Malfoy right now. Ron brightened. So we'll find Greengrass. She doesn't hang around with us much, but she gets on well with you, right, Lucien? Ron winked, which made Hermione frown, clutching her book. We don't need to beg her, she said coolly. There are other ways. Ron opened his mouth to protest, but Hermione wasn't finished. Or maybe it's not even someone from Slytherin. There's something else. Harry's voice was hesitant when he spoke. I think Lockhart's a bit off too. It's just a feeling. The night Madame Norris was attacked, I was in Lockhart's office. Lucien's mind jumped. Harry was perceptive. He wasn't missing the oddities, even if he didn't have the answer. Lockhart's office, with its odd hourglasses and lack of clocks, was a perfect spot to mislead a child's sense of time. Lockhart had also managed to make Harry into an alibi before. The trick had been subtle and convincing. Ron nodded slowly at Harry's idea. The defense against the dark arts position is suspicious, but we can't pin it on Lockhart just because of last year. He's a blithering show-off. Could he really be behind something like this? Ron, Professor Lockhart isn't an idiot, Hermione protested helplessly. The more she attended his lectures, the less certain she felt. Was he really as brave and brilliant as his books claimed? Ron put his hands up. Sorry, I forgot you have a heart next to defense against the dark arts on your timetable. Anyway, why do you all like someone like Lockhart? I thought you'd like Lou. Ron! Hermione shrieked and shoved a thick book into Ron's face at the same time, silencing him in a flurry of scolding and very loud book thwacking. Yun Defour. I want to see Harry Potter. I want to see Harry Potter. Defense against the Dark Arts Office. Lockhart scratched at an old diary with a peacock quill. Are we really going to target the boy so soon? Should we wait a little longer? The risk is still too great, isn't it? As the ink faded, Lockhart waited anxiously. Lately, Tom's replies had been slower and slower. What used to appear almost instantly now took minutes. Even Lockhart's own words took longer to vanish. Could something be wrong with Tom? After all, he'd said he was only a memory. Lockhart muttered uneasily to himself. He couldn't bear the thought of losing such a magical artifact, nor the friend who understood him and had already done so much for his fame. Inside the diary, in a room that was almost an exact replica of the headmaster's office, the young Tom lounged back in the chair with no sign of the frailty Lockhart feared. Lockhart, he said with a half-smile, his magic level is truly pathetic, probably no better than an ordinary grown wizard, maybe worse than some very talented students. Heh, but he has his uses. He's easy to manipulate. His desires are too strong and too obvious, perfect for steering. Tom paused, then picked up his pen and wrote in the new diary. Your kindness flatters me, but didn't you mention a student named Lucien who could provide mandrake? The antidote has already been prepared. The boy will only be out for a few days. If we don't accelerate things, if the incident isn't dangerous enough, not sensational enough, how will you become a hero? How will there be any headlines? Opportunity knocks but once. As he wrote, Tom's mind turned over the next steps. The appearance of a student who could supply mandrake had been unexpected but manageable. It wouldn't upset his plans. Even if he used the basilisk to petrify Lucien, it would be pointless. The antidote existed. Now was not the time for slaughter. He needed to gather strength until he could rebuild a body for this fragment of his soul. When that day came, he would unleash a storm of blood and slaughter. There were two obstacles to remove first. One was Dumbledore. The other name made Tom's voice tighten with contempt and fury. Harry Potter! What a joke! Me, defeated by a baby. No, that wasn't me. That was me decades later. What on earth was he doing? Through their conversations, Tom had learned of the events of recent years from Lockhart, how you-know-who had been driven out of the wizarding world, how people whispered his name. At first, Lockhart had been afraid even to write Voldemort in the diary, but under Tom's coaxing, he had said it plainly. You-know-who was Lord Voldemort, a future version of Tom Riddle himself. Tom knew then that in some future, he would rise to incredible power. And yet, the story everyone told said that Lord Voldemort had been undone by a mere infant, Harry Potter. The idea split something inside him. Decades of study, the heights of magic, and all of it undone by a baby? It was intolerable. He forced himself to calm down. He would see this boy who lived once he had a body again. A baby defeating the Dark Lord? He would personally judge what made the child so exceptional. Outside the diary, Lockhart saw Tom's reply and let out a relieved breath. Then he frowned at the next line, and after thinking, wrote again. I'll consider it, my friend. Are you feeling unwell? Is there anything I can do? This time the writing faded a little faster. Tom read it, and a thin smile crossed his blurred features. He's hooked, he wrote slowly. My friend, you know I am only a memory, destined to fade. I am glad to have known you. I once read that things rich in life force, dragon's blood, for instance, might ease fading. Next to Hagrid's pumpkin patch, Hagrid hauled a monstrous orange globe across the garden and heaved it over the fence with Lucien's help. I still have to thank ye, Lucien. If it weren't for your help, this year's giant pumpkins might not have been big enough, Hagrid rumbled, stacking pumpkins outside the patch for Halloween. You're welcome. There should have been a lot more this year, right? What happened? New pests? Did the insecticide I gave you wear off? Lucien asked as they lifted another pumpkin. Hagrid set it down, rubbed his beard, and spoke in a complaining rush. I've still got loads of that potion you gave me, and it ain't pests. It's Lockhart, your new defense against the dark arts professor. He came by a few days ago and said he knew a charm to make pumpkins bigger. Gestured about forever, and then some of the charms he cast shriveled a whole patch, turned 'em all to the size o' my fist. How do you use pumpkins that small? Glancing at Hagrid's fist, actually larger than a casserole dish, Lucien had to suppress a smile. They were tiny, but not useless. Hagrid kept going. He wanted to teach me how to stop merpeople from getting into the well. Don't I know how to do that? And he were talking about repelling werewolves, banishing banshees. He's got all sorts of the wrong information. And he asked where he could get large quantities of blood from dragons and chimeras. Do you think Lockhart thinks those things live in the Forbidden Forest? Hagrid sighed. It's hard to find a defense against the dark arts professor. Everyone thinks the job's unlucky. Dumbledore must have seen Lockhart's problems, but he's probably the only candidate this year. Lucien's jaw tightened. Lockhart's questions about creature blood made sense now. He was only the messenger. If Lockhart wondered where to get monsters' blood, it was because someone persuasive, had asked him to find it. One life force was too slow. A lot of magical blood would speed things up. With Lockhart's means, any purchases would probably be made through legal shops. Gilderoy didn't lack coffers. The Great Hall had been transformed for Halloween. Pumpkins, bats, ghosts, and the familiar flitting candy bats Dumbledore had conjured, a reprise of Lucien's idea from last year. Among the sweets were a few of Lucien's own experimental treats, which added an unpredictable element to the festivities. Lucien wasn't scrambling for snacks. He carried a large bag full of Honeyduke's treats, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, fizzing Whizbees, ice mice, jelly slugs, gathered in a thoughtful pile. Filch had given it to him as thanks for saving Madame Norris. The mandrake antidote he'd prepared had indeed revived the cat. Filch, who didn't often thank anyone, had bought an assorted bag so Lucien could pick what he liked. Sucking on a sugar quill, Lucien was about to sit at the Ravenclaw table when Harry appeared and tugged him toward the Gryffindor side. "Lucien, come quick, we found a new clue," Harry called. "Here, have a candy. Happy Halloween," Lucien said, handing him a handful. He sat and passed sweets to Hermione and Ron. Hermione immediately began to lay out her thoughts, precise and eager. Actually, besides the air of Slytherin theory, the word monster in the writing is important. If we can figure out what the monster is and how it moves around the castle hurting people, that's a promising angle. Lucien felt they were making real progress. Without a specific suspect, the trio were widening their approach, thinking about the monster itself. In the original tale, Polyjuice Potion and a trip to the Forbidden Forest led to other discoveries, but there was nothing stopping them from pursuing the creature's identity directly. It wasn't impossible to learn the truth with the right books and questions. Then someone screamed. Someone's been petrified. It was Halloween again, and the familiar panic returned. There were no professors present. Some students hid in the Great Hall. Others surged toward the source of the commotion. A prefect tried to restore order. "Don't run, don't panic. I'm a prefect, listen to me." His voice held for a moment like a rock in a tide, but the crowd crashed over him and he was swept aside. Lucien, Harry, and the others pushed through until they reached the scene. On the wall, written in blood-red letters, was a short, chilling sentence. "The first." It was enough to make the skin crawl. Lucien pushed forward and saw the victim. A pretty girl with long, curly hair, Penelope Clearwater, a Ravenclaw prefect. She stood rigid, her face drained of color, eyes unnaturally wide as if she'd seen something terrible. One hand was raised, roughly at face level. At her feet lay a small, cracked mirror. Lucien's throat tightened. She'd been looking into the mirror. It must have reflected something dreadful. Whispers rippled through the assembly. "The first? Last time it was just a cat, now it's really a student? Will I be next? Is she Muggle-born? I'm pure blood, right? Does anyone know her?" "That's Penelope from Ravenclaw." Fear and unease hung over the crowd. Petrification was terrifying. To be frozen, unable to move, trapped in a living statue. Before, the victim had been a cat, Madame Norris, and many students had disliked her. Now it was someone who had been in their classes that morning. A dark gray, scruffy cat padded through the crowd, its lamp-yellow eyes sweeping over them before it wandered off. "Madame Norris?" someone asked. "She's recovered?" another voice answered. "Yes, Didn't Lucien take out a big jar of mandrake juice? The antidote got made in a few days. So Penelope will wake up soon then? But petrification is still scary. What if? I'm going to carry a vial of the antidote around. If I get petrified, one of my sisters can help. Forget it, brothers. No way. If you're petrified and then revived, do you miss classes? Do you get away with no homework? The murmurs went on, a nervous attempt to find something practical to latch onto in the middle of terror. 195. Cured by medicine. The hospital wing was crowded. Dumbledore, Professor Snape, Professor Flitwick, and Lucien all sat around the bed. Madame Pomfrey would never have allowed so many visitors if the patient truly needed rest, but the incident had been too important. Penelope had just come out of petrification. As the first to face the monster, anything she remembered could be a vital clue. Dumbledore, as headmaster, had to hear it himself. Snape, who brewed the antidote, needed feedback. Flitwick, Penelope's head of house, had to tend his student. Lucien had been summoned too, officially because he'd supplied critical mandrake roots, though that excuse felt thin. "Lucien, thank you," Dumbledore said softly. "If not for your mandrakes." Penelope, still pale and fragile from being restored, forced a weak smile. "Don't mention it," Lucien replied quickly. "We're classmates." "Do you have any pain?" Flitwick asked. Penelope shook her head. "No, just a little hungry." Lucien visibly relaxed. Hunger meant she was all right. Dumbledore continued, "And thanks to Lucien's materials and Professor Snape's." "That wasn't my improvement," Snape cut in, glaring at Lucien with a mix of irritation and puzzlement. He had supervised the antidote's brewing to gauge Lucien's potion-making level. Lucien had not only brewed it perfectly, but had suggested refinements that Snape put into practice, reducing the antidote's side effects. Without them, Penelope might have been bedridden for days. What troubled Snape wasn't the changes themselves, but the aptitude Lucien had shown. Snape had thought Lucien talented, perhaps the best of his students, but not quite a genius. Yet the precision and insight Lucien displayed suggested his skill had leapt forward, and Snape could not reconcile that with his prior assessments. There was no reason for Lucien to hide his ability. Hogwarts professors didn't harm students, so Snape's confusion lingered. "Then Lucien's contribution is most significant," Dumbledore said brightly, changing tone. "I seem to recall a special contribution award." Lucien's expression tightened. That award had been given to Tom Riddle 50 years ago. The mention of it felt ominous. "Headmaster, the award can wait," Lucien deflected. "We should focus on the crisis." "Penelope, do you remember anything about the attack?" Dumbledore asked. She frowned, rubbing her temple. "I was looking in a mirror. I saw a flash, yellow light. That's all, I think." The professors exchanged looks, recalling similar cases. A monster, a mirror, a flash of yellow light. What kind of magic could it be? Outside, in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, Gilderoy Lockhart dipped a peacock feather quill into an unusual bottle of ink. The liquid smelled faintly of smoke and something fishy. It was a deep, dark red rather than black. He scrawled a question across the diary's pages. "Friend, is this ink mixed with dragon's blood and purple-horned beast blood effective?" The inked words vanished almost as soon as they appeared, as though some thirsty thing had drunk them. New handwriting appeared in their place. "Thank you for your help, friend. Now I can stay in this world a little longer." Lockhart exhaled in relief. Good. The memory in the diary, Tom Riddle's, hadn't dissipated. He would still have an advisor. The expense of buying rare bloods didn't worry him. His best-selling books had padded his coffers enough to pay for whatever theatrics he needed. Fame begat fortune, and Lockhart intended to keep both. He wrote again. "Phew, indeed a student has been petrified. Tom, you were right. As long as the monster is contained and there's an antidote, there's no real killing. Our plan can proceed." In the diary's inner world, thin wisps of pale light rose from the crimson ink and were absorbed by the boy's likeness on the page. Tom's features sharpened, his dark eyes deepened. He breathed inwardly. An adult wizard who could afford costly supplies had bought the diary. Perfect. A young, poor wizard's vitality wouldn't have sustained him. One more month, maybe 2, then he could fully restore himself. Tom scrawled back, "We must speed things up. With so few victims and an antidote available, the panic is insufficient. We need more petrifications, students who matter." He tapped the quill and the letters took on a colder edge. For example, Harry Potter would be perfect. The boy who lived would be invaluable. Lockhart hesitated, then answered slowly, Harry Potter? From my contact, he's just a boy with character. Not quite the legend people make him out to be. Tom's gaze narrowed in the diary. Cowardice? Soft-heartedness? Stupidity? He wrote to persuade. The world knows the boy who lived, not Harry Potter the child. Picture it. When the basilisk is about to devour the savior, you make a grand entrance and repel it with extraordinary charm work. The wizarding world will sing your praises. Gilderoy Lockhart, savior of the future. And you'd only have to ensure Harry is petrified first. No real risk, right? Tom watched Lockhart's reply, but his own plan was darker. He planned not merely to have Harry petrified to stage a rescue, he would have the basilisk kill him outright. It was careless for his future self to have tried personal revenge on a protected infant. Protective magics, vows, and unknown contracts might trap him. Better to let the basilisk do the deed. If the savior died at Hogwarts, Dumbledore would shoulder the blame and the scandal would be immense. Tom thought happily of the damage that would do to his enemies. Lockhart wrote, If it's only petrification, I can manage the basilisk control. But if I use too deep, obscure magic, others won't understand. Maybe flashy, showy spells would be better? Tom was silent for a beat, then supplied a handful of showy charms, eye-catching but practically superficial tricks that would make Lockhart look brilliant. Lockhart took the instructions eagerly and tried a few out right there. Colored sparks and ribbons of light spiraled from his wand, making the man appear radiant and heroic. What's a good place for a display, he wondered. Quidditch pitch. Many students, excitement in the air. Clouds were gathering over the Quidditch ground. The heat and humidity of the day stuck to everyone's skin. The threat of rain made visibility a concern. Even with Lucien's waterproof wristbands preventing dampness of hands, rain still complicated playing and spectating. Lockhart's plan needed a crowd, and a high-profile Quidditch match would draw one. In the Gryffindor changing room, Oliver Wood was giving his trademark pep talk. Slytherin may have better brooms, but our team is stronger. Sweat beats money every time. Harry tightened his fingers around his broom. It wasn't a Nimbus 2000, but one of the new models, an East Wind, designed by Lucien. The broom's core seemed to channel small arcs of air and electricity along a dark walnut and mithril handle engraved with lightning motifs. After flying it, Harry had fallen in love. Compared to this East Wind, his old Nimbus 2000 felt dated. The new broom outclassed the Nimbus 2001 in speed, acceleration, flexibility, and stability. East Wind, Lucien said that was the series name. Harry had a feeling the brand would eclipse Nimbus, Comet, and Cleansweep. He was riding an East Wind. His old Nimbus was lent to one of the chasers to avoid any equipment disadvantage. At least as Seeker, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage, Harry thought aloud. And though Lucien had lent a similar broom to Malfoy, Harry didn't begrudge him. Friends of Lucien should have access too. Gryffindors didn't kidnap a friend's inventions. They stepped out onto the pitch. With identical brooms, the match would come down to skill. 196, Dongfeng Broom, restoring the normal running ball. 96, Dongfeng Broom, restoring the normal running ball. Huge cheers and commotion filled the Quidditch pitch. Lucien stood in the Ravenclaw stands, watching the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams line up under Madame Hooch. With a blast on her whistle, the match officially began. All 14 players leaped into the air at once, but two figures shot up so fast that, while others had only risen 10 or 20 meters, they were already over 30, hanging steady in midair and scanning the field. The brooms beneath them drew blue and white streaks of light that cut sharply across the leaden sky. Spectators noticed the unusual scene at once. Look, those two are flying crazy fast. They must be the Seekers. What model are those brooms? Why do they leave trails? Hey, lend me your binoculars. Mine are broken. Get lost. Broken? You're just jealous of my auto-tracking. Go buy your own at Workshop 7. My pocket money's gone. Come on, let me see. Lucien didn't need binoculars. He activated his eye of peering, and two tiny vortices swirled in his pupils. At the same time, he scribbled rapidly in a small notebook with a quill. Magic dissipation rate too high during turns. 2 deceleration runes can be replaced with 1 deceleration and 1 lateral. When Harry made a right-angle dive that seemed to defy physics, the broom's tail stopped being a smooth electric arc and became a rapid cascade of flashing blue particles. The quill scratched on. Under extreme maneuvering, magic conduction shows attenuating fluctuations. Material: trimithril alloy with serpent blood magic crystal. Malfoy kept closing on Harry by relying on brutal forward acceleration. During one violent turn, Lucien noticed a row of runes along Malfoy's broom flare. He added another line to the notes: signs of imminent overload. Braking balance module needs reinforcement. Abrupt speed shifts will prematurely fatigue material, unavoidable in real combat. Then Lucien frowned. A bludger twisted oddly in midair, hesitated, and lunged straight toward Harry's back. He set down his quill and gripped his wand. In an instant, the charging bludger stopped. Lucien narrowed his eyes. The black vortices in his pupils expanded as he glanced toward a corner of the pitch, lips moving just slightly. Below the stands, a house elf in a patched pillowcase flailed his hands. Short and thin, with bat-like ears and bulging green eyes the size of tennis balls, Dobby was desperately trying to force the bludger to hit Harry Potter. He didn't want to hurt Harry. He wanted to make Harry leave Hogwarts, to remove him from danger. But something had cut the control that had been smooth moments before. The bludger seemed to have fallen into a trap, frozen and unable to move. Dobby heard a voice, not aloud, but like a whisper inside his head. "Don't interrupt my observations yet. We'll talk later." A terror he couldn't explain crept into Dobby. The voice was calm but carried an undeniable pressure. As Dobby began to shake, the voice spoke again. "Don't be afraid, Dobby. I know you want to keep Harry safe, but you don't need to do it that way." Hearing his name and purpose spoken back to him, Dobby froze and then slowly lowered his hands. Satisfied the bludger was no longer a threat, Lucien put his wand away and continued recording Harry and Malfoy's performance on their East Wind brooms. Quidditch was surprisingly permissive. There were no real restrictions on modified brooms. If a player could ride one and dared to, any broom, official or homemade, could be brought onto the pitch. He mused, not without dark amusement, that with strong enough healing magic, riding a modified broom was manageable so long as it didn't kill you outright. Merlin's broom. It's crunch time again. The Seekers are insane today. Same model, same speed, and look at those trails. Is this some new product? But with identical brooms, it comes down to the Seekers. Harry Potter still looks a cut above. Lee Jordan's excited commentary favored Gryffindor as always, winning cheers from Gryffindors and boos from Slytherins. Harry was closing in on the Golden Snitch. The match was nearing its end, and Lucien's data collection was almost complete. He tucked away his quill and notebook. In the Ravenclaw stands, he was about to get up to find Dobby when a soft voice reached him over the roar of the crowd. "Lucien, are those brooms your work? It feels like everything new at school is connected to you." He turned and saw Luna Lovegood, her huge silver eyes bright beneath an enormous lion's head hat. It looked alarmingly lifelike and seemed to be silently roaring. Lucien smiled. "Yes, what do you think of how they fly?" Luna tilted her head like a curious cat. "Very fast." It whooshed up, then zoomed forward and made a nice swoosh on the turns, and the blue and white tail is pretty. Lucien was used to Luna's peculiar manner. He glanced again at the lion hat. "Luna, this hat." "Oh, this." She shook her head, and the lion's head wobbled charmingly. "I wanted to support Gryffindor. I sewed it myself. I wanted it to transform like your rabbit shoes, but my transfiguration's still new. I wish it would roar for real, but I don't know what magic to use." Lucien found her endlessly interesting. Most people would never think of wearing a giant lion's head. "You could try the Beast Roar charm, but you'll need to tune it to sound exactly like a lion. Or record an actual lion's roar with a recording charm and bind it with a preservation charm to the hat. They're in basic charm interpretations in the library." Luna's silver eyes sparkled. "Thank you. You seem busy, so I won't interrupt." The lion hat bobbed back into the crowd. Lucien left the stands and, using his eye of peering, tracked Dobby's location. He found the trembling house elf and cast a silencing charm around them as a protective measure. Dobby flinched at Lucien's approach and babbled out his confession. "You must be the voice. Dobby just tried to hurt Harry Potter. Dobby should be punished. Hogwarts will become dangerous this year. Harry Potter cannot stay, but Dobby's master. Oh no, Dobby cannot." Dobby's hands hung at his sides, swollen and bloodied, with raw knuckles as if he'd pounded something hard. Lucien noticed a wooden stake nearby, smeared with blood. He tapped his wand casually. A soft white light flowed over Dobby's hands and healed them within heartbeats. Dobby's eyes widened the way they always did when someone helped him. Thank you, sir." Dobby bowed clumsily. Lucien watched him and thought of Kubi, the house elf at Nicholas's house. Both were house elves, but their lives couldn't have been more different. Kubi had wages and decent clothes. Dobby had a single old pillowcase. In the wizarding world, house elves were bound to serve wizard families, obedient, bound, and punished if they disobeyed. They could only be freed if their masters gave them clothing, which their own kind treated like a shameful expulsion. Servitude was deep-rooted in their species, with few exceptions. "Hogwarts won't be in danger this year," Lucien told Dobby. "You don't need to try to protect Harry by hurting him." Dobby stammered, looking as if he wanted to argue, but dared not. Lucien shook his head and walked away. He still had adjustments to make to the East Wind broom after collecting combat data. "By the way, Dobby," he said over his shoulder, "if you ever want a job that pays, come find me, or apply at Hogwarts." A little later, a group of students clustered around the bulletin board, all staring at a fresh parchment tacked up there. "Dueling Club," someone read aloud. "The first meeting is tonight. We'll finally learn something useful." "I was worried this year's OOL Defense Against the Dark Arts would be a disaster. Quirrell last year, Lockhart this year. What rotten luck," another moaned. "Maybe Flitwick will teach. He was a dueling champion once. He'd actually teach us proper technique." 5th and 7th years were especially eager. The OWLs and NUTs were looming, and results mattered. 2nd years were excited too. It was embarrassing not to have practiced proper dueling after more than a year at Hogwarts. In Charms class, Professor Flitwick expanded his lesson to cover dueling, which thrilled the students. He spoke with his usual brisk clarity. "The most important thing in a duel is calm. Casting recklessly spoils your rhythm, gives your opponent an opening, and wastes magic, bad for endurance. Powerful spells can end a duel in one strike, but they take time and are easy to interrupt. Quick, simple charms often win in close quarters. Is there any volunteer to assist me?" Flitwick's eyes settled on Lucien. Lucien rose and went to the front to demonstrate formal dueling etiquette with the professor. Flitwick hopped down from his stack of books, waved his wand to clear space, and the two bowed, wands at the ready. Lucien opened with a shield charm, a standard duel opener, which drew a faint eyebrow from Flitwick. It was usually taught later, but not surprising for Lucien. They traded spells as Flitwick physically demonstrated timing, wrist angles for misdirection, and how to anticipate and dodge. "Thank you, Lucien," Flitwick said. "Who else would like to try?" Hands shot up, but when students actually paired off, they found themselves stiff and nervous. Compared to the effortless demo, their dodges and counters were clumsy. Nearby, students asked Lucien for tips. Transfiguration and herbology classes also folded dueling into their lessons. And in herbology, a few joked about using mandrakes as weapons, only to be warned sternly by Professor Sprout that such use would injure classmates, even if they might prove useful against true villains outside school. After a day of talk and practice, anticipation for the dueling club reached a fever pitch. 197, Duel Club 8 p.m. The Great Hall had been cleared of its long tables and fitted with a gleaming golden stage. Hundreds of candles flickered overhead, bathing the room in wavering light. "Lucien, are we just doing a normal duel later? And after that we'll promote your... Harry hesitated, unable to remember the name of Lucien's device. Lucien nodded and supplied it. "Just stick to what we practiced. Perform at your usual level. They're called VR glasses, virtual reality." He produced a silver-white, helmet-shaped rectangle that would cover the eyes and part of the face. 2 lenses on its front were patterned in blue and silver. It looked technological, but it was a purely magical creation, a training tool that presented duel tutorials and virtual combat practice to whoever wore it. Not a substitute for live instruction, but better than reading or watching plays. Lucien had only finished the first generation. He could improve them later. After tonight's demonstration, they would be sold at the 7th workshop. Given how long the students had suffered under the current Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, selling them should be easy. Speaking of the professor organizing the dueling club, Harry trailed off. Look, hasn't he already arrived? Lucien followed his gaze. Lockhart swept across the hall in magenta robes, flamboyant and grinning, his teeth dazzling in the candlelight. Beside him, in stark contrast, stood Snape in black. His face was as cold as ever, but his eyes showed a strange mix of disgust and barely concealed anticipation. Snape hated Lockhart, but the chance to publicly take the man down and prove himself as a teacher of Defense Against the Dark Arts seemed to thrill him. Seeing Lockhart and Snape approaching together, Harry's face fell. Lockhart's really not reliable, is he? And Snape, he teaches potions. Why is he here? Lucien read Snape's sour expression and guessed the thought behind it. Snape wanted this post and would relish humiliating Lockhart. If Lockhart suddenly retired and Dumbledore couldn't find a replacement, would Snape get the job? Lucien let the thought pass. Lockhart was already calling for attention. Gather round, Lockhart announced, like a showman summoning a crowd. Many students had come, which delighted him. He wanted to display a bit of flashy magic before staging his later heroic rescue. Tom Riddle's diary had given Lockhart some pointers. He fancied himself improved. Excellent. Can you all see and hear me? He asked, beaming as a chorus of girls cheered. Thanks to Headmaster Dumbledore's permission, I've founded this dueling club. I'm honored to teach you the combat techniques I excel at. Believe me, these skills may protect you in the future. If you'd like more, you can read my books. Lucien watched from below, the corner of his mouth twitching. There was something to learn from Lockhart after all, an utter confidence and shamelessness few possessed. A ridiculous thought struck him. If Lockhart used a memory charm on himself to truly believe the stolen memories were his own, would he actually be able to perform the spells? It sounded absurd, but this was the wizarding world where idealism sometimes had power. He made a mental note to try and get a look at Lockhart's memory later. Allow me to introduce my assistant, Professor Snape, Lockhart flourished. Believe me, your potions master knows a thing or two about dueling, Lockhart said with a smile. He has graciously agreed to assist with a demonstration. Haha, don't look so worried. I'll return a complete potions professor to you when we're done. Snape's look grew colder. His fists were already clenched. Lucien imagined how easily, given the chance, Snape might draw his wand and unleash something unpleasant. On stage, Lockhart preened, while Snape only bowed stiffly. We hold our wands in a dueling stance, Lockhart continued. When I count to 3, we will cast our first spell. 1, 2, 3. On 3, they raised their wands. Snape's voice was flat and precise. Expelliarmus. Lockhart's wand flashed with something more ornate. Neon Pierce, he intoned. A white arrow of light, surrounded by swirling colored smoke, leapt from his wand. The crimson blast from Snape shattered Lockhart's smoky arrow and struck Lockhart hard in the chest. He flew backward and hit the wall like a sack of laundry. For a few seconds, he stuck to the stone before sliding down and curling up on the floor. Whether Snape had used too much force or not, his wand flicked idly, and his expression held a faint, satisfied light, one that suggested he could have finished the job if he had wanted. The Slytherins clapped and cheered. Ron leaned close to Lucien and whispered, half excited, half horrified. Lucien, Lockhart still hasn't got up. Did Snape kill him? Is Snape going to Azkaban? Before Lucien could answer, Lockhart had scrambled to his feet, smoothed his hair, and tried to recover his dazzling smile. Oh, thank you, Miss Brown. He chirped as a girl returned his wand. He took it, grimacing slightly at the pain in his chest, and forced his signature grin. I was just demonstrating the consequences of being hit with Expelliarmus. However, Professor Snape's movements were quite easy to anticipate. If I'd wanted to dodge or parry, well, it would have been effortless. His words died as Snape's expression hardened. Lucien watched and thought that if Lockhart had been alone with Snape, things might have gone far worse. Lockhart cleared his throat and moved on. The demonstration is over. Professor Snape and I will divide you into pairs. Lucien was paired with Parvati Pill from Gryffindor. He knew her twin, Padma, from Ravenclaw. The two girls chatted and then performed the customary dueling bows. Once their duel began, it quickly became Lucien instructing Parvati, correcting her wand movements, adjusting the cadence of her incantations, while also blocking stray spells that drifted their way. Hogwarts students hadn't been great at defensive magic in recent years, most of them cast by instinct. Misamed spells flew all over the hall. Petrificus Totalis has a slow startup and is harder to aim, Lucien told Parvati. It's better inside 3 meters. Relax your wrist. This spell doesn't need tension. Parvati's face lit with the sudden understanding of a pupil. Lucien, you really are the knowledgeable Ravenclaw. No wonder my sister talks about you. Sis, didn't you ask me about him first? Padma said, having drifted over behind them. The twins looked nearly identical, only their robes gave them away. Parvati blushed, about to explain when Lockhart's voice cut through the hall. Stop! Stop at once! Today, only practice Expelliarmus. It was no wonder he was flustered. Students had been hit by one another's spells, some dancing comically, others lying stiff as if petrified. Missiles of magic zipped wildly about. Some students had even dropped their wands and taken to hand-to-hand tussling. Then there had been the explosion that made Lockhart blanch. Finite incantatum. Snape's wand sliced through the air, sending a cloud of shimmering green smoke that rolled across the hall. Spells were suppressed, and the chaos slowly died away. Lockhart stepped forward, sweat on his brow, trying to marshal the students. This is too chaotic. Dueling shouldn't be like this. Let's have a proper demonstration. Is anyone willing to come up? 2 voices answered at once. I will. Lucien looked up and saw Harry and Malfoy on the stage. Both gave Lucien a quick thumbs up. Lockhart, taken aback, made a point of warning them. Wait until I count 1, 2, 3 before you start. Understood? Harry and Malfoy nodded. Lockhart began to count. 1. On 1 they moved. Both cast quick, basic shield charms, precursors to stronger protections, and then opened into a flurry of actions. Harry raised his wand. Expelliarmus! A red jet shot forward. Malfoy sidestepped, not wanting to meet the spell head-on. In Lucien's small practice group, they'd worked on responses to Potter's signature move. Meeting it in direct opposition was foolish. Levitation charm! Malfoy countered, trying to redirect Harry's attack. Harry ducked and rolled, then pulled several potion bottles and jars from his pockets. Vasidisi! He cried. The containers shot toward Malfoy at speed. 1 or 2 struck his basic shield, shattering and spilling potion across the stage. Snape, standing behind his Slytherin, intercepted a bottle with a casual flick. He was annoyed at the mess and wanted to take points from Gryffindor, but his attention had shifted. The timing and fluidity with which Harry and Malfoy cast showed a level of training far above their classmates. Lucien felt a small pride. Snape's gaze flicked to him below the stage, registering that Lucien had coached the 2 boys well. Malfoy fought back. Serpensortia, he spat. 3 black snakes burst from his wand and slithered toward Harry. The sight made the students on either side recoil and scream. Lockhart swallowed audibly and tried to step forward. Let me get rid of them, he began, but Harry was already in control. Lumos, Harry cast, and a ball of intense light slammed into the snakes, dazzling them into stillness. He followed with 3 precise levitation charms, making the snakes float harmlessly in the air while keeping them immobilized. The glare of the light also momentarily blinded Malfoy, and Harry seized the chance. Expelliarmus! Malfoy's wand flew from his hand. A beat of stunned silence was followed by a roar of applause and chatter across the hall. Oh my God, that duel was amazing! Well done! Gryffindor beat Slytherin again. It was just a slip by Malfoy. He should have retaken his opponent. As other students edged toward renewed fighting, Lockhart hurried forward, trying to claim credit. What an excellent demonstration. Of course, this is thanks to my guidance on wrist movement last week. Harry ignored him. He reached into his shrinking bag and produced the silver-white rectangular VR glasses. He turned them so the entire hall could see. Are you all curious how I did it? He asked in a voice that sounded oddly, very familiar. Lockhart's smile froze. 198. Harry's new advertisement. Standing on the dazzling golden stage, Harry held up the sleek, silver-glowing glasses. Subtle runes on their frame flickered as if breathing. Are you all curious how I did it? His voice carried to every corner of the Great Hall. Thanks to Lucien's help and invention, I want to introduce everyone to this, the virtual eye. He held them high so as many students as possible could see. Are you frustrated with stagnant defense against the dark arts lessons? Do your spells feel clumsy? We all want a teacher who can guide us anytime. With the virtual eye, you can duel a virtual opponent whenever you like. It records your movements, analyzes the flaws in your spells, and can even simulate the most famous duels so you can spar with masters from history across time and space. Buy during the promotional period and get a free set of Defense Against the Dark Arts tutorials. Limited supply, first come, first served. Lockhart, standing off to the side, felt a tangle of emotions. Harry's gift for showmanship reminded him of himself, and a pang of bitterness rose when he thought how Harry had overshadowed him at the summer book signing. Harry's fame meant anything he did would attract attention and headlines. Envious and resentful, Lockhart only grew more entrenched in his schemes with Tom. Lucien watched with a small, approving nod. Not bad. The advertisement was getting sharper. Harry delivered his lines smoothly now and didn't flush with embarrassment. Very good. After the final version of the East Wind broom was finished, Lucien planned to go update the shop stock outside. The Great Hall exploded with chatter after Harry's pitch. Students' faces showed surprise and longing. Even those who hadn't tried the virtual eye had just witnessed Harry and Malfoy's duel, the best advertisement possible. Who wouldn't want to pull off moves like that? Save for a few specific charms, most students recognized many of the spells Harry and Malfoy had used, but they couldn't cast them with the same fluidity or the right timing. There was another crucial point. If Hogwarts' Defense Against the Dark Arts professor were competent, the virtual eye might be a curiosity at best. But many students cast sidelong looks at Lockhart. The image of him being knocked sprawling by Snape's single Expelliarmus was still fresh. The official Data professor beaten by the potions master? Some students were already suspicious. They had once thought Lockhart simply avoided showing off, but after tonight it seemed more like his shortcomings had been exposed. Virtual eye sounds amazing. Are you going to buy one? They said group purchases get a discount. If you buy one, it's like I bought one. Buying an extra would be wasted. How does Lucien make these things? We all take the same classes, don't we? Lucien really does invent all kinds of strange and wonderful gadgets. Do you think he'll do custom orders? You want a potion to make someone fall in love with you? Yes. When I get it, you'll be the first one I try it on. Harry looked out at the excited crowd and knew the advertising mission Lucien had given him was a success. Malfoy off stage was still annoyed. His Slytherin classmates instead praised him. Most of those crowding around him were first to third years who admired his performance and admitted they couldn't have done better. Slytherin students were pragmatic. They pursued glory and power and admired strength. Malfoy glanced at Harry on the stage and felt a prick of irritation. If he'd won, he would have had the spotlight. The dueling club had ignited students' enthusiasm. Conversations about dueling and the duel between Harry and Malfoy were everywhere. Several students asked Lockhart when the next meeting would be. He had to disappoint them. Only one more session would be held before Christmas. But outside the club, another avenue had opened. Many students had been streaming to the 7th workshop to ask the twins about the virtual eye's release date, eager to practice Defense Against the Dark Arts and dueling. Harry, returning from the library, had a pounding headache because Colin Creevey would not stop peppering him with questions. Colin, the Gryffindor first year who loved taking pictures and who idolized Harry, held a small notebook and quill and stared up expectantly. Harry, do you have any more thoughts on your duel victory? Who helped you the most in learning magic? What's your most proficient or favorite spell? This barrage was enough to make Harry wince. Colin had been one of the victims a few days before, petrified and then restored. Fortunately, the mandrake antidote Lucien had supplied was plentiful, and Colin had woken. Colin remembered stiffening and losing consciousness while taking photos in the castle. The teachers had hoped his camera might have captured the attacker's face, but the film had been ruined and the camera damaged beyond immediate repair. Colin, do you feel any lingering discomfort? Harry tried to divert him. Colin shook his head cheerfully. Madame Pomfrey made me stay in bed for days. I missed classes, but the worst was missing the dueling club and your amazing performance, Harry. I would have taken so many photos. Oh, my camera's still broken. I really should have photographed the attacker who petrifies people. I could have shown my dad. The magical world is incredible. Lucien, listening from the side, inwardly rolled his eyes at Colin's priorities, woke from petrification, and the first thought was photos for his father. If only the basilisk's gaze hadn't destroyed the film. Could one even record that? When Harry finally nudged Colin away, he sighed. Lucien, this year has been so eventful. I asked older students, and they said there wasn't this much trouble before. Since I arrived, strange things have been happening constantly. Lucien glanced at him. Had the boy finally noticed? Harry, there's an old saying in the East. When heaven is about to confer a great office on a man, people destined for greatness must undergo many trials. Do you understand? Harry nodded slowly. I think so. So, Lucien, if you go through these trials, you can become a great figure in the magical world? Lucien hesitated, but Harry's excitement continued. Last year, Quirrell and Voldemort tried to seize the Philosopher's Stone, and you helped stop them. This year, the heir of Slytherin sent monsters into the castle, and you brought mandrakes for the antidote. Lucien, if you keep using your wisdom and magic to solve these problems, won't the world be safe? When we graduate. Lucien rubbed his forehead at the boy's naive leap. Some people really were trouble magnets and never noticed. He cleared his throat. Ahem. What I mean is, these hardships may be coming for you. Have you forgotten who your persistent enemy is? Harry was momentarily speechless, ruffling his unruly black hair. Me? Right. Also, I'm still annoyed about last night. When I went to the washroom, a house elf appeared. Dobby. He came to warn me that Hogwarts might be dangerous for me and urged me to leave. He even said someone had planned to control a bludger to attack me. He repented and apologized so much. No wonder I felt a chill. Lucien listened. Dobby had found him again. So, Harry, what will you do? Of course I'm not leaving, Harry said firmly. Running away is only temporary. I want the strength and courage to face Voldemort. I can't learn that at my aunt's house. I have to stay at Hogwarts and learn from the professors and from you, Lucien. Oh, by the way, you mentioned teaching us the shield charm. I remember that's usually for 4th or 5th years, right? Harry's determination made Lucien smile faintly. The shield charm was in upper-level courses. Beyond the difficulty, the current wizarding educational philosophy meant practical combat. Charms were often neglected. Only students aiming for combat careers like Aurors bothered to master them. Meanwhile, in Boxworld, in the alchemy workshop area, Lucien made final adjustments to the east wind broom. The sounds of wind and thunder that swirled around it softened, not because the broom's power had diminished, but because it was like the calm before a storm, ready to explode when needed. When the last trace of electric arc and airflow was fused into the broom, Lucien felt the east wind was officially complete. Ding. Lone triggered, beginner elemental lightning rune. Lucien didn't pause. He finished the remaining steps, then checked the loan details. Loan name, beginner lightning rune. Repayment period, 7 days. Loan content, obtain beginner elemental lightning rune. Increase host's affinity for lightning. Accelerate learning speed of lightning-related magic. Increase power of lightning-related magic by 10%. Loan task, prevent a thunderstorm. The loan caught his interest. An affinity for lightning and faster learning were nice, but the 10% power boost across lightning spells was the real draw. System, does this power boost apply to all lightning magic, from a simple electric arc to higher-level lightning cage or electric lock, he asked. Applies to all lightning magic. A thin smile appeared on Lucien's face. The broader the boost, the more valuable it was. 10% might not sound huge, but on high-level spells, it was significant. Besides, this was only the beginner rune. Intermediate and advanced versions would likely be even stronger. He wondered about other elements, fire, water, wind, and whether similar runes existed. Yes, after beginner come intermediate, advanced, master, and grandmaster levels. All elemental types are included. Elemental magic had enormous potential. Loans like weekly ones were random, though, and which elemental rune appeared depended on luck. Lucien considered the loan's task, preventing a thunderstorm. That wasn't hard. He could craft an alchemical device to amplify a cessation or wind-stopping charm, or have Ethel handle it. Thunderbirds could summon storms, but could also clear them. System: I'll take the beginner elemental lightning rune loan. Ding, loan application successful. Evaluation: collect all elemental runes and a small surprise awaits. A small surprise? Lucien chuckled at the system's tease and looked at his right thumb. A faint, lightning-shaped silver pattern had appeared on the pad. Subtle purple arcs flowed through it, and the branching ends bore tiny, true-to-life barbs and bifurcations, a pattern that felt both calm and fierce. 199. Abstract Thunderbird, Thunder Pattern Amplification Box World. Lucien arrived at the stretch of sky where the Thunderbird Ether liked to practice. Ether was soaring through the clouds, working on difficult spins and vertical dives. Electric arcs danced around him, sometimes thick like thunder drakes, sometimes thin like silver snakes, piercing the clouds and turning them into driving rain. Lucien wore a water-repellent bracelet, so the downpour didn't bother him. Looking up at his intermittently visible companion, he realized Ether was performing a courtship display. According to this precocious Thunderbird, the early bird gets the worm. The first time Lucien heard Ether say that, he'd wondered if the unicorn's blessing had mistranslated it. Only after getting little Chilin to help with communication did he confirm Ether really said it. Lucien had also asked Ether why he was so obsessed with finding a mate. Ether's answer had been blunt and cheerful. "Boss, since I woke up, I've known I'm a male Thunderbird born to be the king of Thunderbirds. I'll find lots of mates, lay lots of eggs, and grow my flock. 2 years ago, I tried to court an older female, but she ignored me. Her mate even came and beat me up." Lucien had felt a complicated mix of amusement and sympathy. Thunderbirds could be eccentric too. If Ether hadn't ended up following him, his personality would probably have led to disaster sooner or later. Now, watching the thunder and rain-laced cloud deck, Lucien raised his wand. Electric arcs at the tip began to shift from blue-white to a faint purple. The elemental thunder mark on his thumb tingled warm. The mark was drawing in thunder elements from the surroundings and channeling them into the charms he'd prepared. He started with the simplest, an arc blast. Where before it would have been a loud spark, his wand now spat a purple electric arc, thumb-thick, twisting and crackling like a whip as it struck a distant tree and left a scorched seam. Next, he tried a static barrier. The faint glow condensed into a crackling solid shield woven of dense electric serpents. A drifting leaf that hit it turned to ash instantly. After a few of these, Lucien poured more magic into the wand, feeling the thunder mark flare on his thumb. Thunder Cage Lightning Lock. Chains of pure lightning thundered from the wand tip, thick as living snakes, coiling and lashing around a boulder he designated as his target. After testing a few charms, Lucien confirmed what the loan description had promised. The elemental thunder mark had boosted his lightning magic by roughly 10%. Basic charms showed little difference, but high-level spells like Thunder Cage Lightning Lock felt noticeably stronger. A sharp caw from above interrupted him. Ether was announcing his arrival. Lucien glanced up to see several thick bolts of lightning plunging from the cloudscape, as if pulled by an unseen hand, smashing into the lightning chains around the boulder. Boom! The chains reshaped at once, forming a true cage of heavenly lightning. The flare made Lucien narrow his eyes. The trapped boulder cracked and split with a grinding screech, searing into dust in a blinding flash. The thunder cage faded and left only scorched earth. Ether beat his 3 pairs of wings and landed in front of Lucien. "Boss, you smell so good!" Ether hopped forward, muttering about smelling good. Lucien raised a brow, then understood. He held out his right hand with the wand and made the thunder mark on his thumb glow brightly. "Ether, is this what you mean by smells so good?" Seeing the silver-white lightning sigil, Ether nodded vigorously, oddly human in his expression. "Yes, boss, it wasn't there before. It was the mark's influence. Thunderbirds are innately sensitive to thunder elements, and the elemental thunder mark amplified Lucien's affinity. When he channeled lightning magic, the mark drew in nearby thunder elements and wove them into the charm, strengthening the spell. In the last cast, the mark had even drawn the storm's lightning, which Ether had given a final nudge to complete the strike. "Did you push the lightning down from the clouds?" Lucien asked. Ether rubbed Lucien's palm with his beak, inhaling the purple arcs gathering on the mark. Yes and no. When you were casting, the cloud lightning already wanted to fall, but only weakly. Your spell stirred them up, and I gave them a push so they followed your pull and blasted the rock. Thunderbirds perceive thunder elements keenly. The more complex the spell and the greater the element accumulation, the stronger the sky's response. Lucien looked at the lightning-shaped mark and thought, this was only the primary level. If he raised it further, it might not only draw in more thunder elements to amplify spells, but even directly trigger lightning strikes in suitable environments. Elemental marks could be powerful, earth ones for soil, water ones for lakes and seas. Boss, can I taste the lightning magic you make? Ether asked, looking expectant. Thunderbirds ate lightning. Lucien let a small arc spell leap from his wand, a purple-tinged bolt. Ether swallowed it whole, smacking his beak with obvious enjoyment. Rich, long-lasting flavor, rare treat. Lucien pinched the bridge of his nose. Where did the bird learn sass? The unicorn's blessing must be translating Ether's tone and memes perfectly. How is it? Does that fill you up? I think. Ether went alert. Boss, you're not going to feed me only this, are you? Actually, it tastes good, but it's no substitute for charcoal roasted lamb, clean water steak, or spicy fried chicken. Those fill you up. We Thunderbirds still need to hunt. Just eating lightning makes us sick. Lucien often found Ether's foodie instincts exhausting. All right, I never said I'd cut your rations. Ravenclaw common room. Marietta, could you call Chew for me? I want to talk about Quidditch. Marietta, Chew's roommate and friend, brightened at the gossip bait, but then registered Lucien's actual request and switched to helpfulness. She gave a thumbs up and ran toward the girls' dormitory. Lucien sank into a sofa. At Hogwarts, girls could go into the boys' dorms, but boys couldn't enter the girls'. Ravenclaw's girls' stairwell was guarded by two silver-armored figures that did not take kindly to intruding boys. He'd read Rowena Ravenclaw believed girls were more reliable, hence the precautions. Chew arrived shortly after, her nose a little red. As she stepped in front of Lucien, she sniffled and let out a small sneeze. Her voice had a nasal edge. Sorry, Lucien. I was just about to go to the 7th workshop for cold medicine. That potion you made works so well, and it doesn't taste odd. Most importantly, she added with relief, it doesn't make steam come out of your ears like Madame Pomfrey's stimulating potion. Tomorrow, Ravenclaw would play Hufflepuff in Quidditch, and Chew did not want any embarrassing side effects. Lucien stood, wand already in hand, and murmured a charm. A soft white aura flowed from his wand and enveloped Chew. The drowsiness and stuffiness lifted. She felt refreshed. Thank you, Lucien. Your healing magic works fast. That too was partly the unicorn's blessing. Whether he cast healing spells or received them, the effects were stronger. Marietta said you wanted me for Quidditch, Lucien said casually. Have you decided you want me to join the team? Chew's face lit with hope. Ravenclaw was the weakest Quidditch team. Fewer students and an imbalance between girls and boys made fielding a full team hard. If Lucien joined, senior, she hurried on. About the match with Hufflepuff the day after tomorrow, could you let me debut the real East Wind broom on the field? Lucien pulled the final version of the East Wind broom from his pocket. Chew's disappointment at his not joining the team flickered across her face, but vanished as she focused on the broom. Is this the same model the Gryffindor and Slytherin Seekers used before? It feels different, quieter. Lucien handed the broom to her. Yes, this is the final version. Its stability is improved. Chew's eyes shone. How did you come up with so many inventions? I heard alchemy is taught in 6th year. Did you teach yourself? Lucien grunted inwardly about the loan he had to repay, but kept his tone light. Self-taught is an exaggeration. I met a very good teacher over the summer who taught me a lot. Also, I invent things to make money. Chew eyed him skeptically. Make money? You don't look like you need it. Lucien glanced up at the ceiling, sighed theatrically. I enjoy making money, and I want to help classmates study better. Chew laughed. So when you graduate, will you be a businessman or a teacher? Actually, I'd rather be a headmaster or even minister for magic, so I can reform magical education, Lucien said earnestly. Chew's smile faded into a warm seriousness. Okay, I'll definitely vote for you. Oh, before the match with the new East Wind broom, can you practice with me? I want to get used to how it handles. Sure, Lucien said without hesitation. Can you meet at 4 o'clock? Chu blinked. 4? In the morning? Yes, 4 a.m. at Hogwarts is quiet and peaceful. After a pause, Chu said softly, Lucien, are you really sure you won't reconsider joining the Quidditch team? With your dedication, you'd be a star. Lucien rubbed his chin. Let's skip it for now. I don't want to crash. Chu looked puzzled. The Quidditch pitch was caught in a furious storm. Flags on the stands snapped wildly in the wind, and rain fell like sheets from a sky torn open. Cho Chang inhaled the cold, damp air and tightened the high ponytail at the back of her head. The raindrops were heavy enough to soak anyone in seconds, but around her, they slid away about 5 centimeters from her skin, as if repelled by an invisible film. She tightened her grip on the anti-water bracelet at her wrist. Thanks to Lucien's work, Quidditch players could stay dry even in a downpour. That didn't solve everything, though. Visibility was miserable. Torrential rain and the cloud of mist that sprayed up where the rain met the ground made tracking the golden snitch nearly impossible. The snitch was already tiny and quick in clear weather. In this curtain of gray, it was a hopeless needle. If only the rain would stop, Cho murmured, then shook her head. The storm looked like it would last for hours. She forced herself to focus. The east wind broom in her hands steadied her. After a short but stunning test flight, she had been completely won over. The broom outclassed every comet, cleansweep, and nimbus she'd ridden before. Speed, stability, responsiveness, magical conductivity, everything. Cho's admiration for the young Ravenclaw who designed it was only growing. She tried to rally herself. With the east wind, our chances are high, she told herself, and prepared to take her position under Madame Hooch's whistle. Then a sound tore through the rain, huge and not like thunder, so loud it momentarily overpowered wind and water. A cluster of dazzling, multicolored light shot up from the Ravenclaw stands, a brilliant streak like a fish fighting upstream, slashing into the heavy clouds. Everyone froze. 10 seconds later, the rain hitting Cho's invisible film thinned. When she looked up, the leaden cloud layer was riddled with silver veins of lightning, shredded from within. The clouds thinned and dispersed before her eyes. Not long after, the rain stopped. A weak shaft of sunlight pushed through and lit the wet pitch. Cho turned toward the Ravenclaw stands and saw Lucien Grafton waving. Beside him, a black cylindrical object stood. He slipped an alchemy tool into his pocket, the pocket itself enchanted with an undetectable extension charm, and glanced up as a golden yellow shape flashed past the cloud edge. The Thunderbird, Ether. Ding! Congratulations to the host for stopping the storm. The basic elemental lightning rune weekly loan has been repaid, Lucien had said quietly, as if reading a message from the tool. With the alchemy device and the Thunderbird working together, dispersing a storm wasn't that hard. The Ravenclaw spectators erupted. What just happened? He pulled out a huge black cannon. He fired it. By Merlin's beard, the rain stopped. The awe for what Lucien had done washed over everyone. His earlier gadgets and potions had been clever, but changing the weather left an entirely different impression. Madame Hooch's whistle blew, and the match began. In the commentary box, Lee Jordan's voice boomed magically across the pitch. The match is underway. Look at Ravenclaw's seeker, Cho Chang. The broom she's on, well, it looks a little different from before, but that speed and those beautiful smooth turns, no doubt the east wind. Oh, the talented Lucien designing the broom, and Cho so elegant. What a story of cooperation between our upper and lower years. Truly a Ravenclaw delight. It seems Ravenclaw's strength is terrifying today. Cho, hunched over the east wind and straining to find the snitch, heard the commentary and felt her broom nearly stall. Lee's gush about Lucien and her made her cheeks burn. Mercifully, no one could see her from so high. She forced herself to steady the broom and hunt down the tiny, darting ball. In the Gryffindor stands, Ron stretched onto tiptoe, peering across to Ravenclaw, trying to glimpse the black cylinder Lucien had tucked away. Harry, did you see that? That loud bang. Lucien did that, right? He stopped a storm. Harry shrugged. I heard the bang. Isn't this the wizarding world? Storms can be dealt with by magic, I guess. Ron, raised in a wizarding family, could not quite hide his astonishment. It's extreme. My air gun is pathetic by comparison. One shot and the clouds disappeared. Their conversation was cut off by the burly Gryffindor captain, Wood, who pushed through the crowd and came up to Harry, rubbing his hands. Harry, If Lucien can dispel rain like that, could you ask him if we can borrow it? If we could do that for practice, we'd get a lot more done. I'd even ask McGonagall for funding if there's a rental fee. Harry hesitated, then managed, I'll ask him. Excellent. Train well, and we've still got a shot at the cup. I'm counting on you. Harry could only give a helpless smile at Wood's enthusiastic pressure. In the teacher's stand, reactions varied. McGonagall leaned toward Flitwick. Phileas, when Ravenclaw practices, does Lucien usually change the weather like that? Flitwick, waving a tiny Ravenclaw flag, laughed. Minerva, even I only just saw him take that item out for the first time. McGonagall glanced back toward Lucien, and then at Flitwick with a mix of envy and pride. First, he unveiled a personally designed broom, and now an item that can change the weather. I don't know which is more astonishing. Flitwick's grin widened. Lucien is certainly an unusual child, always producing little surprises. These surprises are edging into full-on shocks, McGonagall said, and, with a small flourish, handed Flitwick the morning's issue of Transfiguration Today. The cover headline made Flitwick drop his flag. Lucien Grafton, the most innovative Transfiguration achievement in a century? McGonagall had kept the news from him on purpose. She'd seen Lucien's draft paper and wanted to watch Flitwick's reaction. Flitwick, blushing like someone caught off guard, flipped through the journal. Minerva, this is quite a stimulant for my little heart. McGonagall laughed. Honestly, if Lucien wanted it, he could teach Transfiguration. Maybe I'll retire when he graduates. I've always wanted to travel. Minerva, your deputy head and head of Gryffindor, Flitwick protested. Even more reason to leave the job to a genius like Lucien, she said. Flitwick changed the subject. With his work on magical creature transfiguration, surely he's a shoo-in for the Ring of All Forms? Of course, McGonagall agreed. He's raised Transfiguration to a new level. It's not that Lucien needs the award needs Lucien to prove its value. She glanced toward Dumbledore. Maybe even the Order of Merlin. Several heads turned to Dumbledore. The Order of Merlin required approval from the Wizengamot, and the Chief Warlock's opinion mattered. Dumbledore toyed with his half-moon spectacles and gazed not at the pitch, but up toward the thinning clouds. Noticing the attention, he said, mildly, I've been rather busy lately. I can't quite remember. The teachers were used to Dumbledore's coy evasions. He knew full well what the Order of Merlin signified. Academically, Lucien certainly merited a second-class order for his transfiguration work. A first-class order, though, usually carried the unspoken requirement of saving many lives or resolving a crisis of the wizarding world. Some ministers had conferred first-class orders on themselves. A few had essentially bought them. Most who truly deserved the top honor had met that crisis threshold. Lucien's role last year, helping prevent the return of Voldemort when he possessed Quirrell, counted as resolving a crisis, but Dumbledore suspected the senior authorities would refuse to accept that particular threat as real. Still, Lucien was young. Dumbledore thought he would have other chances. A second-class order would already put him ahead of most people. Dumbledore's expression shifted to something like puzzlement. When had Thunderbirds appeared here? Newt Scamander hadn't been around lately, had he?